Chapter 659. The thought that flashed through Chen Wansai's mind made him shudder. This man, who had been in the business world for half of his life, had seen all kinds of conspiracies and sinister scenes, could not help but feel a deep fear in his heart when facing a young woman who was much younger than him. For a rich man like Chen Wankai, such a terrible thing as the destruction of his family was something he had never dreamed of. Especially for a rich man like him, who had started from scratch, what he wanted most was to live longer, to work harder and more solid for his foundation and country, so that his branches and leaves could spread more widely. But now, everything seemed to have been destroyed, because he had given birth to a good-for-nothing son. Wealth could not last for 3 generations. Was this really the curse of the rich? But he was only the 2nd generation. Was he going to die as the 2nd generation of the Qin family? No, there must be a way, there must be a chance. Chen Wankai shivered and stared at Ziyuan, as if he wanted to find some clues from her expression. However, Ziyuan's eyes were as cold as water, and he couldn't see anything unusual. Xinyu, who was standing to one side, also noticed the terrible killing intent. He grabbed Chen Wankai and shouted in horror, "Dad, don't be afraid. She's threatening us, threatening us. What era is this? How can there be such a thing as extermination?" As he said this, he shouted at Ziyuan in a threatening manner, "Are you crazy? The extermination of a family is a capital crime. No one can save you." Ziyuan didn't even look at him. She said coldly, "You should think about how to save yourself first." Chen Wankai turned his face and looked at his son with tears streaming down his face. He said in a trembling voice, "It's my fault. I didn't teach you well when you were young. It's my fault." Xinyu looked at his father in horror and shouted, "Dad, what did you say? We don't have to be afraid of them. I don't believe they dare to destroy our Shin family. There are also people above us." Shen Wankai didn't seem to hear what he said. He hugged his son tightly as if this was the last time he would hug him. After letting go of Xinyu, he turned around and wiped his tears. The expression on his face slowly returned to normal, as if in an instant, he had returned to the powerful and ambitious man in the business world. Chen Wankai calmly said to Ziyuan, "Ziyuan immortal, I will give you an explanation. However, can you come back to my house first? It's really not convenient here." Ziyuan walked over to the unconscious Su Chan and gently covered her with her 9th heaven Ziyuan silk. Then she took out a talisman from her bosom, pinched her fingers and shouted to the door, "Zhou Qin, take care of the follow-up here." Zhou Qin's voice came from outside the door. "Don't worry, leave it to me." Ziyuan nodded and grabbed the collars of Chen Wankai and Xinyu with both hands. Her figure flashed and turned into a green light. When Chen Wankai and Xinyu opened their eyes again, they found that they had returned to the Shin family's villa. It had only been more than 10 minutes since they had come and gone. At this time, the Shin family's villa was in a mess. The 2nd wife, the 3rd wife, and the 4th wife were so anxious that they were pacing around in the living room. Just as they were panicking, Shen Wankai and Xinyu suddenly appeared in front of them. Beside them stood Ziyuan and Su Chan, whose whole body was wrapped in purple silk. The 4th concubine, Li Shaoxian, saw her son covered in blood and looked as if he had been greatly frightened. Her heart suddenly trembled. She immediately rushed to Xinyu and said in a trembling voice, "What happened? How did you end up like this?" The 3rd concubine, Auntie Zheng, rushed to Chen Wankai with concern and said, "Old man, where are you hurt? Why is there so much blood? Zhang, hurry up, call an ambulance." Chen Wankai raised his hand and stopped housekeeper Zhang from making a phone call. He said in a hoarse voice, "It's okay. It's not my blood." Li Shaoxian was shocked and frantically searched Xinyu's body. "Is it yours? What happened to you? Where are you hurt?" Xinyu looked at his father in horror, and then moved his eyes to Ziyuan. He said in a trembling voice, "Mom, someone wants to kill us. Call the police, call the police." Li Shaoxian was shocked and raised her head abruptly. "Oh, who has the guts?" Chen Wankai laughed. The terror of his laughter made those who were familiar with him feel creepy. He turned his face and said to housekeeper Zhang, "Zhang, close all the doors and forbid anyone from entering or leaving. Also, go and get a knife." When everyone in the Shin family saw Chen Wankai laughing, they felt goosebumps all over their bodies. When they heard his last words, they were so scared that their hair stood on end. Auntie Zheng grabbed Chen Wankai and said in surprise, "Old man, what are you doing with a knife?" Chen Wankai turned his face and stared at her coldly and terrifyingly. He said coldly, "Let go." Auntie Zheng trembled under his gaze. She was speechless. Housekeeper Zhang was also frightened. He stood there and didn't know what to do. Chen Wankai glared at him and shouted angrily, "Zhang, how many years have you been with me? Do I have to repeat myself a second time? If you don't want to go, I'll go by myself. Housekeeper Zhang was so scared that he quickly went back to the kitchen. After a while he came back with a fruit knife. Chen Wankai kicked him without looking at it. Do you want to die? Why are you using such a small knife? Housekeeper Zhang was kicked by him and quickly crawled into the kitchen. This time, he took a kitchen knife and handed it to Chen Wankai with a frightened expression. He said in a trembling voice, "Master, calm down. What's so serious that you need to use a knife?" Chen Wankai held the kitchen knife in his hand, weighed it in his hand and rubbed the blade with his thumb. He laughed strangely and said, Good, it's very sharp. What a good butcher's knife." As he said this, he turned his face and said lightly to Shen Yu, "Give me your hand." This sentence was like a clap of thunder, scaring all the Shen family members. Li Shaoxian looked at Chen Wankai in disbelief. "Old Shen, what are you doing? Are you crazy?" Although Lao San had always been at odds with Lao Si, especially because he was jealous of her having a son, Chen Wansai's behavior was too abnormal and strange. She was so scared that she hugged Chen Wansai's arm and shouted, "Old master, he is your son." Mrs. Ma, the second oldest, was so scared that she grabbed the Buddha beads in front of her chest with both hands and kept turning them, chanting scriptures in a trembling voice. Shen Yu stared at his father with wide eyes and shouted, "Dad, are you crazy? I didn't do anything wrong. What are you going to do?" Chen Wankai laughed bitterly. "You know best whether you did anything wrong or not. Now there are only two ways in front of you. I will kill all of you and then I will commit suicide. The other way is that I will cut off your evil hand and then beg Li Jiandong to let us go. Choose for yourself." Shen Yu was so scared that he collapsed to the ground. Although he had thought that if this matter were to happen, the consequences might be very serious, but at most he would be slapped like before and grounded for a few months without pocket money. However, he never thought that this time it would be so serious. Li Shaoxian grabbed the kitchen knife from Chen Wansai's hand and shouted crazily, "Old Shen, you are crazy. What on earth did he do that made you do such a cruel thing? Haven't you heard that tigers don't eat their cubs?" Chen Wankai laughed bitterly and said, "Yes, it's because tigers don't eat their cubs that I didn't kill him. What did your precious son do? Why don't you ask him yourself?" Shen Yu was so scared that he quickly cried to Li Shaoxian, "Mom, I didn't do anything. I really didn't do anything. Help me." Li Shaoxian cried bitterly. She hugged her son and shouted, Mom believes in you. Don't be afraid. I will definitely save you." Chen Wankai suddenly became furious. He kicked Li Shaoxian in the heart and roared angrily, "You saved him? I'm telling you, you are the one who hurt you. Do you know what it means to have a loving mother and a spoiled son? If you hadn't indulged him again and again, would he have become like this today?" Li Shaoxian was kicked to the ground by him. For a moment she was in so much pain that she curled up into a ball and couldn't get up. She could only cry loudly. For a moment, the Shen family's villa was gloomy and murderous. Chen Wankai turned his face and glared at Shen Yu with a ferocious expression. He shouted, "Give me your hand." Shen Yu was unwilling to do so. He quickly withdrew his hand behind his back and kept crawling backward. Chen Wankai quickly stepped forward and kicked Shen Yu in the head, causing him to turn over. Then he stepped on him with one foot, grabbed his arm with one hand and waved the kitchen knife with the other. He roared, "Is it this hand? Is it this hand that touched Su Chan?" Shen Yu was so scared that his whole body was trembling. His pants were wet in an instant. He shouted hoarsely, "Mom, help me." When Li Shaoxian heard her son's cry, the pain in her body seemed to disappear in an instant. She got up and rushed toward Chen Wankai like a madman. "If you dare to touch my son, I'll fight you to the death." Chen Wankai was furious. He raised his hand and slashed at Li Shaoxian's face. Li Shaoxian looked at the knife coming at her and was so scared that she was stunned on the spot. She didn't even know how to dodge. However, Chen Wansai's knife stopped at the moment it was about to cut her. The cold blade stopped at the tip of her nose. Chen Wankai gritted his teeth and said, "Li Shaoxian, let me tell you, this knife of mine can not only save you, but also the lives of all the people in the Shen family. Maybe it can also save you's life. But if I don't chop down with this knife, don't regret the consequences in the future." Li Shaoxian was also a very scheming woman. She knew Shen Wankai very well. She knew that the old man of the Shen family was a real ambitious and ruthless person. He was usually gentle and elegant and looked like a human, but once he got serious he was really like an eagle looking at a wolf, iron-blooded and ruthless. Especially when it came to cutting off one's wrist and one's arm in order to survive, he would not even blink his eyelids when he did this kind of thing. If she continued to stop him, then for the sake of herself and the Shen family, Chen Wankai would definitely not care about the relationship between husband and wife at all. He would go back and kill her too. Moreover, Li Shaoxian also knew that Chen Wankai was a very sensible and astute person. If he hadn't been forced into a dead end, he would never have done such a crazy thing. Li Shaoxian gave in an instant. She covered her face and cried bitterly. She sat down on the ground and cried loudly. Seeing that his mother had given up, Xinyu was so scared that he shouted crazily and kept begging for mercy. "Mom, save me, save me." Xinyu's hysterical begging for mercy was heart-wrenching. Even Xin Hui, who had always looked down on her brother, couldn't bear it. She walked up to Ziyuan and whispered, "Sister Ziyuan, please let my brother go this time. He already knows that he's wrong. He won't dare to do it again." Ziyuan said with a cold face, "There is karma in the world, and there is retribution in heaven and earth. What if he hadn't provoked Su Chan this time, but some other girl who had no strength to fight back? Then it wouldn't have been him who would have sought death, but those girls. What would you have done to them? Who would have upheld justice for them? Who would have upheld justice for them? Tell me, if you were the one who had been insulted, what would you have done? Since you've done something wrong, you have to bear the consequences of doing something wrong." Ziyuan's words made Xin Hui speechless. She sighed softly, shook her head and retreated to the side. Xinyu's face was twisted with fear. He shouted at Li Shaoxian, "Mom, save me." Li Shaoxian's heart was broken by his shout. She raised her head with tears streaming down her face. She stroked her son's face, which was distorted by fear, and said in a trembling voice, It's okay. It'll be fine in a while. It'll be fine in a while." Xinyu was so frightened by Li Shaoxian that his expression was dull. "Mom, what are you talking about? What are you talking about?" Xin Wankai raised his head and laughed. He said in a hoarse voice, "There is karma in the world, and there is retribution in heaven and earth." Well said, well said. Why didn't I hear such words before? Why didn't anyone tell me earlier? After that, he roared and raised the steel knife in his hand high. The blade was cold and suddenly chopped down. Chapter 660. Xin Wankai raised the knife in his hand and fell. With a crack, Xinyu's arm was immediately cut into 2 pieces. Blood sprayed everywhere and splashed on Xin Wankai's ferocious face. Xinyu roared in pain and fell to the ground, trembling all over. Seeing this bloody scene, Li Shaoxian fainted without saying a word. Xin Hui was so scared that she hid in her mother's arms. The third concubine was also so scared that she trembled all over. She held Xin Hui and turned her back, not daring to look again. The second concubine closed her eyes and quickly recited the Buddhist scriptures with a frightened expression. She didn't dare to take another look. After Xin Wankai raised the knife in his hand, he pointed at Xinyu with the bloody knife and said in a hoarse voice, "From now on, you are no longer a member of the Xin family. Go." Xinyu covered his broken arm. He kept rolling on the ground in pain, screaming. His face was smeared with tears and snot mixed with his own blood. But after rolling for a while, he suddenly stood up shakily. He stared at Li Shaoxian and his father with red eyes and roared, I hate you, I hate you." After saying that, he stumbled and rushed out. Steward Zhang, who had been scared stiff, subconsciously wanted to stop him, but Xin Wankai immediately shouted, "Old Zhang, let him go. Whether he lives or dies in the future, leave it to God to decide. I'll pretend that I never had a son like him." Steward Zhang's face was also full of tears. "Master, he is your son?" Xin Wankai was unmoved. He turned his face, threw down the kitchen knife, and knelt down in front of Ziyuan with a thud. He presented Xinyu's broken arm to her with both hands and said in a trembling voice, "Can this dispel young Master Li's anger?" Ziyuan's face was expressionless. After a long while, she nodded slowly. Xin Wankai suddenly felt as if all the strength in his body had been sucked away in an instant. His body softened and his hands propped up on the ground. His face showed a rare look of sadness and love. He looked at Xinyu's leaving figure and said in a trembling voice, Don't blame me. Dad did it for your own good. My father used to be very strict with me. He often beat and scolded me, which made me very painful. So I swore a long time ago that if I had a son, I would treat him well and not beat or scold him. But now I regret it. If I had been stricter with you when you were young, you wouldn't be like this today. It's all my fault, all my fault." As Xin Wankai spoke, he beat his chest with both hands and burst into tears. For a moment, the rest of the Xin family also burst into tears. Ziyuan sighed softly. Just as she was about to speak, she saw a flash of blue light at the door. Zhou Qin had returned. Zhou Qin saw that the hall of the Xin family's villa was covered in blood and everyone was crying. She couldn't help but frown and say, "What's wrong?" Ziyuan told her what had happened just now in a low voice. Zhou Qin snorted coldly and said in a low voice, "He got lucky. But why not get rid of all the evils?" Ziyuan shook her head and said, "Heaven has the virtue of cherishing life. Although it was the duty of a cultivator to enforce justice on behalf of the heavens, one should never truly regard oneself as the heavens. Although Xinyu was wrong, he didn't deserve to die. Losing an arm and being expelled from the family is already the greatest punishment for him. As for whether he will choose to be a good person or continue to be a bad person in the future, it will depend on his luck." Zhou Qin sighed softly and said, "What you said makes sense. It's just that I just thought of Deng Yu and Deng Jiao who were forced to death by young Master He. I can't help but feel angry." After that, Zhou Qin looked at Ziyuan strangely and said in a low voice, "By the way, I heard what you said in the hotel. Did you deliberately tell Shen Wankai about young Master He?" Ziyuan nodded slightly. "Yes, if I hadn't said it, Shen Wankai wouldn't have realized the seriousness of the matter. He might have been lucky and even turned against us. Chen Wankai has the disposition of an ambitious and ruthless person. You can see it from his decision just now. If this person can't be subdued as a friend, then we absolutely can't let him be our enemy." Zhou Qin frowned and said, "Aren't you afraid that you will force him into a dead end and fight with us like a trapped beast?" Ziyuan shook her head and said, "No, Shen Wankai is a smart man. He still wants to live a long life. The moment I threw out my trump card, I told him in a subtext, either he will be our enemy and be destroyed, or he will immediately submit to us and stand on the same boat as us. As it turned out, Chen Wankai understood my intention very quickly. That was why he had to cut off his arm to save his life. Look at this broken arm. It's clearly a sign of loyalty." Although Zhou Qin had experienced several fierce battles, she still felt a little dazzling when she suddenly saw Shen Yu's broken arm. She frowned and said, "Then what should we do next? Won't the rest of the Shen family regard us as enemies?" Ziyuan said, "As long as Shen Wankai is here, they won't be able to overturn the sky. It's just that, the price Shen Wankai has paid this time is too great." Zhou Qin chuckled and said, "A strong man cuts his wrist and a lizard cuts its tail. Shen Wankai is indeed a powerful person. Amazing, amazing. He's a character." Ziyuan didn't seem to want to talk about this anymore. She turned her face away and just as her eyes fell on Su Chan, she heard her groan as if she was gradually waking up. Ziyuan and Zhou Qin were overjoyed. They quickly squatted down and asked anxiously, "Su Chan, are you awake?" Su Chan groaned in a daze, "Thirsty, so thirsty." Ziyuan immediately raised her head and said, "Water, get some water." But at this time the people of the Shin family were crying with Shen Wankai. Only housekeeper Zhang was still holding on. He wiped his tears, quickly ran to the kitchen, poured a glass of water and then brought it over. "The water is here." Ziyuan took it and brought it to Su Chan's mouth, but Su Chan reluctantly turned her face away and whispered, "The water of the Shin family is poisonous. You can't drink it." These words made the faces of the Shin family burn with shame. Ziyuan brought the tea to her mouth and took a sip under Su Chan's gaze. Then she brought it to her mouth and said softly, "Drink it. The water is not poisonous. I've tried it." Only then did Su Chan feel relieved. She opened her red lips and greedily drank all the water in the cup. After Su Chan drank this large glass of water, she kept complaining of thirst. Housekeeper Zhang poured her 8 glasses of water in a row. After Su Chan finished drinking, she felt a little better and stopped asking for water. Zhou Qin, who was standing to one side, was very puzzled. She asked Su Chan in a low voice, "Su Chan, what kind of poison did you get? Why did you drink so much water?" Su Chan moaned in pain, "It's so hot, my whole body is so hot." Ziyuan squatted down, pressed her fingers on Su Chan's pulse, and said in a deep voice, "It's a strong aphrodisiac." Zhou Qin asked in surprise, "A 7-tailed fox spirit will be enchanted by a strong aphrodisiac? Will ordinary poisons also work on us?" Ziyuan said with a cold face, "When cultivators cultivate their 5 internal organs, they often cultivate their liver and kidneys to be very strong. The liver is detoxifying and the kidneys are detoxifying. Therefore we cultivators are not afraid of ordinary poisons, because our own liver and kidneys have extremely strong detoxifying abilities. But this kind of aphrodisiac is different from ordinary poisons. Its function is to stimulate the human body's hormones and the speed of qi and blood circulation. It can be said that it is actually a kind of enhancer and aphrodisiac. The liver and kidneys can't offset its effect." Zhou Qin gritted her teeth and said in a low voice, "Fortunately, we didn't make things worse tonight. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. Ziyuan pressed Su Chan's Shinting acupoint with her hand and slowly poured her purine qi into Su Chan's body to calm down the hot qi and blood all over her body. At the same time, she whispered to Su Chan, "Su Chan, how did you take these pills?" Su Chan struggled to open her eyes and said with difficulty, "Someone sent me a midnight snack, and then I was poisoned after eating it." Her words shocked the third concubine, Auntie Zhang, and she cried out, "But we all ate it. How can we be fine?" At this time, Steward Zhang's face suddenly changed. He stamped his feet and said, "Alas, I see, I see." Auntie Zhang turned to look at Steward Zhang and asked in surprise, "Old Zhang, what do you mean?" Steward Zhang wiped his tears and said, "Young master once told me to give Miss Su Chan a midnight snack with Longjing tea. He also told me not to tell her that it was from young master. I didn't think of it at that time. Alas, it's all my fault. If I had noticed it earlier, such a thing wouldn't have happened." At this time, Shen Wankai was already a little tired from crying. With the help of Shen Hui, he slowly stood up and said in a hoarse voice, "Don't say it, it's all fate." He turned his face and said to Su Chan, "Miss Su Chan, I have already driven my unfilial son out of the house. If there is anything else you are not satisfied with, please tell me. I will definitely do it." At this time, Su Chan only felt that her head was burning into paste. She groaned in pain and said, "I want to go home, I want to go home. Yindong, where are you? I'm so sad." Ziyuan quickly picked her up and coaxed her as if she were coaxing a child. "Su Chan, be good. I'll take you back now." After Ziyuan stood up, she bowed slightly to Shen Wankai to show respect and politeness. She said softly, "Mr. Shen, neither of us wanted to see what happened today, but what's done can't be undone. I hope that Mr. Shen can focus on his health and not think about other unnecessary things. As for Li Yundong, I will tell him what happened and the result. I believe that Li Yundong is also a reasonable person and will not pursue the matter any further." Shen Wankai seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant. He looked old and said in a choked voice, "Ziyuan Immortal, I won't say anything unnecessary. You can do as you please. I hope that the two families will be friends in the future, not enemies." Zhou Qin sighed softly and said, "Mr. Shen, my father is right. You are indeed a great person. See you later." Shen Wankai watched the two of them leave and stood there in a daze. After a long time, he laughed strangely and said, "A great person? I cut off my own son's arm with my own hands. I'm really a great person." Shen Wankai laughed, but tears flowed down unconsciously. Third Aunt Taijin, who was standing to one side, also cried with him and said, "Old master, what should we do in the future? How should we deal with the current situation? What about Shenyu? What about Li Yundong?" Shen Wankai waved his hand weakly and slowly sat down on the sofa. His old and thin body seemed to shrink into the sofa. He said in a hoarse voice, "You all go to rest. No one is allowed to mention what happened today. As for you, none of you are allowed to look for him. Leave his fate to God." After saying that, he buried his head deep into his palms and let out a deep sigh. After the storm of the Shen family, Ziyuan and Zhou Qin returned home with Su Chan. Zhou Qin saw Ziyuan sitting by the bed and staring at Su Chan, who was sleeping soundly. There was a strange light in her eyes. She couldn't help but ask curiously, "What's wrong? Why do you look at Su Chan a little strange?" Ziyuan turned around and said with a serious face, "When you broke the window of the hotel room with me, did you notice something?" Zhou Qin asked in confusion, "What is it?" Ziyuan's eyes flickered and fell on Su Chan. "Why is one of Su Chan's 7 tails golden?" Zhou Qin was stunned. "Golden tail? What's wrong with that?" Ziyuan said with a serious face, "Since ancient times, only the tail of the 9-tailed celestial fox is golden, and since ancient times, only the mystical silver fox has cultivated to the realm of 9 tails. So, it can be said that only the tail and fur of the mystical silver fox are golden, and the other foxes are not golden." Zhou Qin was shocked and looked at Su Chan with her mouth agape. "You mean? Su Chan?" Ziyuan shook her head. "I'm not sure yet." Zhou Qin didn't say anything. She looked at Su Chan with shock and complexity in her eyes, and her expression changed. She didn't dare to imagine. If the innocent girl in front of her was the mystical silver fox, how would she face it? Seeing Zhou Qin's nervous expression, as if she was facing a formidable enemy, Ziyuan couldn't help laughing. "Don't worry, things haven't been settled yet. Maybe Su Chan's physique is special. Besides, hasn't the mystical silver fox been released in Japan now? No matter what, she will take back the remnant soul of Chao Kefi first, and Su Chan doesn't look like the remnant soul of the mystical silver fox. As Ziyuan spoke, she slowly fell silent with Zhou Qin. The two powerful female cultivators looked at each other and saw deep worry in each other's eyes. If Su Chan was really the incarnation of the remnant soul of the mystical silver fox, what should they do? Or, even if she wasn't and she really became a nine-tailed celestial fox, what should they do? Since ancient times, the appearance of the nine-tailed celestial fox had always been a sign of great chaos. Where there was a nine-tailed celestial fox, there would be war, turmoil, disaster and suffering. If all this really came, what should they do? What should Li Jiandong do? Chapter 661. Tiannan City was bustling late at night. The pedestrians on the road were surprised to see a young man covered in blood stumbling all the way. The young man seemed to have lost an arm and blood kept flowing from it. His face was pale, but his eyes were bloodshot, full of resentment and unwillingness. It was as if an inexplicable force of hatred was supporting him as he kept running forward. This man was Xinyu. Some kind-hearted passers-by wanted to help him, but he roared and roared, "Get out of my way! Get out of my way!" Seeing that Xinyu had taken their kindness for granted, the passers-by shook their heads and stopped moving forward, watching his figure slowly disappear into the shadows of the streets and alleys. Xinyu ran all the way, bleeding all the way. Slowly he could not run anymore. He sat down in a dark alley, his body curled up into a ball, one hand tightly covering the wound of his broken hand. His whole body was trembling, his teeth were clenched, and his eyes were shining with an extremely sinister light. He felt that the blood in his body was flowing little by little, his strength was slowly drying up, his life was slowly fading, and his body was getting colder and colder. All of this clearly showed him one fact: he was slowly dying. "I don't want to die, I don't want to die," Xinyu screamed, his face distorted like a hysterical madman, but soon he began to sob in pain. Although he cried loudly, the water in his body seemed to have turned into blood and flowed away, and not a single tear fell. Xinyu cried for a while, and the more he felt his consciousness become blurred. He looked around and saw that he was in a dark alley between two buildings. Outside the alley was a bustling market. People in bright clothes came and went in the market, and all kinds of good cars were shuttling back and forth on the road. Once upon a time he had looked down at these ordinary citizens as arrogantly as these people, but today he was curled up in this dark corner like a dead dog. Why is this happening? Xinyu's mind buzzed as he thought about this question. He couldn't help but think of the most regretful decision in his life. He really shouldn't have provoked Su Chan. Who would have known that she was a monster? Most importantly, he didn't get to eat fish. It would have been fine if he only got dirty, but he actually got himself into such a situation. Xinyu couldn't help but recall the scene when he had just entered the room. Su Chan was paralyzed on the bed and Gangzi and the other three were standing in the same place, panting. It's Yuyu's turn at that time. He was surprised and asked what had happened. Gangzi said that when they got Su Chan into the car, the girl suddenly struggled crazily, and the strength of her fists and feet was terrible. The four of them were almost broken by her fists and feet. In the end, if they hadn't used the electric baton to knock the girl out, he was afraid that they would have had a car accident. How ridiculous. An unconscious girl was able to torment them like this. How ridiculous. No, she's a monster. No wonder she's so powerful. Gangzi, you guys really deserve to die. If it weren't for your suggestion, how could I, Xinyu, have become like this? Xinyu couldn't help but cry again. He suddenly remembered the scene after that. At that time he was still laughing and asking them if they had sex with the girl on the way. Gangzi, the idiot, said with a flattering smile, "Of course not. Isn't she left for you to enjoy first, young Master Xin?" Just after this sentence, the nightmare began. Su Chan's body began to grow fiery red fox fur quickly, and she instantly turned into a fox spirit. It was ridiculous that Gangzi, who had spoken, had his head bitten off before he could react. Thinking of this, Xinyu couldn't help but shiver all over again. The memory of this night was too deep and terrible. All of this was so terrible that he didn't even dare to have the thought of revenge. He just wanted to hide far away and never see Su Chan, this terrible monster, again. Xinyu's hatred and anger were all unconsciously transferred to his father and mother. In his opinion, he did not have to be like this. It was all because his father and mother were not on his side that he had become like this. The more Xinyu thought about it, the more he felt that it was reasonable. The more he thought about it, the angrier he became. He gritted his teeth and couldn't help roaring, "Shenwankai Li Shaoxian, I won't let you go even if I become a ghost." Xinyu's roar echoed in the street and quickly attracted the attention of several people. A few gangsters shouted at him, "F***ck, what the hell are you shouting for?" Shen Yu glared at them fiercely and wanted to do something, but there was a sharp pain coming from his broken arm. He immediately swallowed his anger. However, these gangsters refused to let him go. They walked slowly to Shen Yu for a yellow-haired gangster whose head was dyed gold. Next to him stood a gangster with a mohawk. These people were none other than the gangsters who had tried to extort money from Li Jiandong's Desangxian store but had been severely beaten up by Li Jiandong. When the yellow-haired man saw Shen Yu covered in blood, he frowned and shouted in a low voice, F***, it's so unlucky. Let's go. This guy is bleeding. Who knows what he did? But just as they were about to turn their heads, Mohican saw Shen Yu's leather shoes and exclaimed in a low voice, Boss, it's Versace. It's an international famous brand. The yellow-haired man slapped him on the head and scolded, What the F***? Do you even know Versace? Mohican looked aggrieved. Yes, how can I not know? My aunt specializes in making these imitations. With my sharp eyes, I can tell the real ones from the fake ones at a glance. This pair of Versace leather shoes is worth tens of thousands of yuan. The yellow-haired man's eyes suddenly lit up. Tens of thousands? He turned his head to look at Shen Yu as if he was looking at a golden man. He chuckled and waved his hand. Brothers, take off his shoes for me. The gangsters around him immediately swarmed forward and took off Shen Yu's shoes without saying a word. Shen Yu panicked and shouted fiercely, Do you know who I am? Stop or I'll kill you. The yellow-haired man and the gangsters looked at each other. The yellow-haired man had been in the underworld for a long time. At a glance, he could tell that Shen Yu was definitely a son of a rich family. He hesitated for a moment, smiled and asked doubtfully, Who are you? Shen Yu subconsciously wanted to say that he was Shen Wansai's son and the only child of the Shen family. But as soon as he opened his mouth, he suddenly remembered Shen Wansai's heartless words. From now on, you are no longer a member of the Shen family. Shen Yu immediately swallowed his words and said fiercely, It's none of your business who I am. The yellow-haired man immediately saw that Shen Yu was pretending to be fierce. A fierce light flashed in his eyes, and he slapped Shen Yu in the face and scolded angrily, F***, how dare you put on airs in front of me? Brothers, strip him for me. The gangsters laughed and took off all the famous brands on Shen Yu's body, not even leaving a pair of underwear. Mohican held Shen Yu's underwear and said in surprise, F***, this underwear is Armani. This pair of underwear costs more than 1,000 yuan. You are really a rich man. The yellow-haired man slapped Shen Yu again and scolded, F***, I can only afford to wear underwear that costs 10 yuan. How dare you wear underwear that costs 1,000 yuan? F***, I hate rich people putting on airs the most. Even their underwear has to be put on airs. At this time, Shen Yu was so frightened that he shrank into a ball and shouted, Help, help. The yellow-haired man immediately kicked him in the head and scolded, F***, how dare you shout? I'll kill you if you shout again. Mohican smiled and shook the underwear in his hand saying, Boss, today's harvest is not small. Just this outfit alone, even if it is sold as a second-hand item, it will be worth 5 figures. Another gangster pointed at Shen Yu worriedly and said, Hey boss, he seems to be dying. Look at him, his blood is almost drained. The yellow-haired man looked over and saw that Shen Yu was frightened. After being tortured by them for a while, the blood from the wound was flowing more violently. He frowned. Mohican, who was beside him, came forward and whispered, Boss, let's get out of here. It will be bad if the police see this. They will think that we cut him. The yellow-haired man glared at him and said, Don't I know? Hurry up, go and find some waste paper. Although the gangsters didn't know what the yellow-haired man was going to do, they still quickly found a pile of waste newspapers. The yellow-haired man snorted and threw the waste newspapers in front of Shen Yu. Then he grabbed his broken arm and said with a grim smile, You are lucky, boy. I'm very kind today. I don't want to see anyone die in my territory. After that, he lit the newspaper with a lighter and said to the gangster beside him, Go and hold him down and cover his mouth. After covering Shen Yu, who was struggling wildly, the gangsters watched in horror as the flame in the yellow-haired man's hand approached Shen Yu's broken arm little by little. With a hiss sound, Shen Yu's broken arm was suddenly burned to a bloody mess, and a pungent smell of burning assaulted their nostrils. Ah! Shen Yu suddenly let out a heart-wrenching scream of pain, but his screams were all muffled by someone's chest. He struggled wildly for a while but soon exhausted all his strength. His vision went black and he fainted. After the yellow-haired man burned Shen Yu's broken arm and stopped bleeding, he laughed, threw the newspaper aside and winked at the gangsters. Let's go. The gangsters were so scared by the scene that they almost vomited. They immediately stood up and ran away like wolves and rats. Only Mohican could hold on. He took tonight's spoils and was about to get into the shadows when he suddenly turned around and said to the yellow-haired man in a low voice, "Hey boss, do you think we should sell this guy to the beggar gang? We can still make a little money from the beggar gang." The yellow-haired man looked at Mohican in surprise. "Boy, you're good at business. Not bad, I'll send you to MBA for further study in the future." Mohican immediately smiled flatteringly and said, "Boss, you taught me well. As the saying goes, make use of waste." The yellow-haired man nodded, took out his mobile phone and made a phone call. Then he took his men to hide in the dark and stare at Xinyu. Before long, two middle-aged men dressed as beggars came to the street. One of them walked up to Xinyu, felt his pulse and then rolled his eyelids. The other walked up to the yellow-haired man, bargained with him and paid him 200 yuan. Then the yellow-haired man and his men laughed and disappeared without a trace. After looking around, the two young beggars quickly put a sack over Xinyu's head. Then they carried the sack one after the other and disappeared into the shadows of the bustling city. Don't think too much about it, I have always hated the plot of the Return of the Condor Heroes. How can I write it myself? Don't worry, Su-chan is my darling. How can I let her be defiled? You think too much, my book won't have such a disgusting plot. Chapter 662. Not long after Xinyu was carried away, Su-chan slowly woke up from her coma. With the help of Ziyuan, the little girl finally got rid of the heat poison in her body. When Zhou Qin and Ziyuan came back, they took Su-chan directly to Ziyuan's residence, which was opposite the residence of Li Yunyang and the others. At this time, the little foxes had also fallen asleep, and the elders of the Fox Zen school had also entered meditation to rest. Therefore no one else knew that something big had happened. When Su-chan woke up, Zhou Qin, who had been waiting by her side, was overjoyed. "Su-chan, you're awake? Do you feel better?" Su-chan rubbed her temples and sat up with a blank face. She looked at Zhou Qin blankly and then at Ziyuan, who was next to her. She asked curiously, "Sister Ziyuan, Sister Zhou Qin, why are you here?" Ziyuan and Zhou Qin looked at each other. Ziyuan said softly, "Su-chan, don't you remember?" Su-chan asked blankly, "Remember what?" Zhou Qin said cautiously, "Xinyu, that beast, wanted to do something to you. Don't you remember?" Su-chan blinked her eyes and tried hard to think about it. Then she shook her head blankly and said, "I don't remember. I just remember that I seemed to have eaten a midnight snack and then I was poisoned. Then I felt like someone was carrying me away. Then I struggled and I don't remember anything else." Zhou Qin looked at Ziyuan worriedly and whispered, "Could it be?" Ziyuan shook her head. "No, Su-chan is still a virgin. I can see that." Zhou Qin breathed a sigh of relief and patted her chest. "That's good. Otherwise, I really don't know how to explain it to Master." She said angrily, "No, I thought about it. I can't let Xinyu, that bastard, get away with it so easily. I'll go and make trouble for him again." After that, Zhou Qin's figure flashed and she rushed out. Ziyuan couldn't stop her even if she wanted to, so she could only shake her head. She turned around and asked Su-chan tentatively, "Su-chan, do you know that you showed your real body in the downtown area?" Su-chan was so scared that her body trembled. She was shocked and cried out involuntarily, "Ah? No way." Then. The little girl naturally knew how big of a disaster it was to show her true self in the downtown, and how much trouble it would cause for Li Yundong. She was so scared that she couldn't speak for a while. She grabbed Ziyuan's arm tremblingly and looked at her eagerly, her eyes filled with fear. Fortunately, Ziyuan smiled and said, "Don't worry, we all arrived in time. Nothing happened." Only then did Su-chan breathe a sigh of relief. She patted her chest and said with a look of fear and relief, "Thank God. Fortunately, I didn't cause trouble for Yundong." Ziyuan said, "Are you going to find him? You were talking about him of you when you were in a coma." Su-chan hurriedly shook her head and said, No, don't cause trouble for him. It's so embarrassing to have such a thing happen." Ziyuan chuckled, only to see Zhou Qin suddenly appear in the room again. Ziyuan asked curiously, "Why are you back again?" Zhou Qin snorted angrily and said, "This guy is lucky. He can't even be found." Ziyuan asked in confusion, "How could he have disappeared? Xinyu shouldn't have been able to run far after losing his arm." Zhou Qin said, "That's why I thought it was strange. I followed the bloodstains all the way from the Shin family, but I lost track of him when I reached a corner of an alley." Ziyuan thought for a while and said, "Forget it. Don't think about him. Maybe he is not fated to die." Zhou Qin gritted her teeth and said, "If you don't get rid of the roots, it will grow again in the spring wind. Since the Shen family doesn't care about him anymore, I won't let him go if I meet him one day. Zhou Qin had been born in the officialdom since she was a child, so she naturally knew the truth of getting rid of evil. When she was in the Shen family she was too embarrassed to say this, but now she couldn't help it. Su Chan looked at Zhou Qin timidly and said in a low voice, "Sister Zhou Qin, don't be angry." "I'm not angry anymore." Zhou Qin glanced at Su Chan and shook her head. "Su Chan, you are really a good person. Do you expect Shenyu to turn over a new leaf?" "Humph, I don't believe it. Don't worry about it. If I meet him one day I will definitely take care of him." Su Chan saw that Zhou Qin's words were resolute and murderous. She was very moved and responded softly, "Oh." The little girl didn't want the two of them to always talk about this matter, so she rolled her eyes and quickly said, "By the way, if we don't protect Shen Wankai and the Shen family, what if the Japanese come to rob the Medicine King tripod at this time? What if other sects come to rob it?" Zhou Qin couldn't help laughing. "You little girl, you can't even protect yourself but you still think about others. Don't worry, the other sects shouldn't come to rob it. Now that the matter of the Medicine King tripod has become so big, if they come to rob it again, it will be useless. As for the Japanese..." Zhou Qin's face darkened and she said to Ziyuan, "Yes, why haven't the Japanese come yet? Shouldn't they come to our country to find Master and the mystical silver fox immediately?" Ziyuan pondered for a moment and said, "I don't know. Maybe there is something wrong with the Japanese cultivation world. However, what I know is that the longer they delay the better it will be for us." Su Chan couldn't help but look in the direction of Japan. For a moment she was a little worried. She whispered, "If they really come, will it cause a war in the cultivation world?" While Ziyuan, Su Chan and Zhou Qin were whispering to each other in the small room, speculating about the current situation of the Japanese cultivation world, in the Yanli Temple of Mount Hai, Japan, an unprecedented gathering of the Japanese cultivation world was being held in a fierce and tense atmosphere. Yanli Temple, also known as Mount Hai Temple, was a large Taoist field standing on Mount Hai, the mother mountain of Japanese Buddhism. It was originally just a small grass hut. In 786 AD, that is, in the 4th year of the Japanese calendar, Master Zuicheng of the Tiantai sect set up a nunnery to preach in Mount Hai. In the 7th year of the calendar, he established the fundamental hall and placed the medicine Buddha statue that he had created with the supreme power of Buddhism. He also officially named the small grass hut Mount Hai Temple. After that, after more than 1,200 years of development, although Mount Hai had been devastated by war 3 times and the mountain temple had been looted 3 times, the largest Buddhist Taoist field in Japan still survived tenaciously, and the Tiantai sect still stood to this day. Although the power of the Tiantai sect was not as great as before, it had been silently guarding the remnant soul of the mystical silver fox with the ape family for thousands of years, and had made indelible contributions to the Japanese cultivation world. Therefore, the Tiantai sect still enjoyed a high reputation in the Japanese cultivation world. Especially after Li Jiandong defeated Masako Tachibana and the mystical silver fox escaped, the Japanese cultivation world originally wanted to sneak into the country quietly to find trouble with Li Jiandong, but at this time, something unexpected happened in Japan. On the day that Masako Tachibana was defeated by Li Jiandong, although there were many Japanese TV stations present at that time, the major cultivation sects still relied on their powerful background to suppress these reports. After all, there were some things that did not have the first video, and ordinary people did not see with their own eyes, so they would not believe it. But what they did not expect was that soon, a female host named Xiang Tian of the Wakayama County TV station used the miniature camera on her chest to clearly record the whole process of the fight, and immediately uploaded it to the internet. Soon, the demon-sealing war near the Qingming Shrine in Kyoto, Japan, was also filmed by some passers-by with their mobile phones and uploaded to the internet. At this time, the whole Japanese internet world was boiling. Many young Japanese angrily logged on to the official websites of the major sects in the Japanese cultivation world and shouted abuse. The Japanese cultivators, who originally wanted to keep a low profile, were all angry. On the one hand, they tried their best to suppress these noisy voices. On the other hand, they knew that it was impossible for them to keep a low profile. Since they could not keep a low profile, the Japanese cultivators began to discuss how to carry out a righteous crusade, but this discussion was terrible. Almost every sect wanted to stand at the peak of the Japanese cultivation world as the leader and lead this crusade. Although the Japanese cultivation world had reached a consensus in a short period of time, if they wanted to unify the Japanese cultivation world, they had to first conquer the mystical silver fox. If they wanted to conquer the mystical silver fox, they had to first defeat Li Jiandong. But soon the problem came again. Who will lead the team to challenge Li Jiandong? Although this question was raised by a very inconspicuous sect, it immediately asked the most itchy place in everyone's heart. The Japanese people's strict hierarchy and desire for righteousness were unimaginable to outsiders. Even if it was a matter like conquering Li Jiandong, they had to distinguish who was superior. For a time the Japanese cultivation world was quarreling. Many cultivation sects scolded each other across the air. The disciples of each sect even began to fight in private. The Japanese cultivation world was in a mess. Under such circumstances, the abbot of the Yanli temple and the leader of the Tiantai sect, Imagawa Kagumo, took the initiative to hold the Japanese exorcism conference. Because Imagawa Kagumo's cultivation was extremely high and he was highly respected. In addition, the Tiantai sect had a long history and was famous, so all the major cultivation sects came to attend the conference. On this day, in the lecture hall of the Jiguan courtyard of the East Tower of the Yanli Temple, 318 cultivation sects and thousands of cultivation masters of the Japanese cultivation world gathered together. The cultivators of various sects sat in the lecture hall in different clothes, arguing loudly with flushed faces. B****, how dare a small Deshang sect be so presumptuous? Why don't you take a piss and look at yourself? How dare you say that you want to lead the Japanese cultivation world? We don't. Although our Deshang sect is small, we are not rats that can be bullied at will. Although the mystical silver fox is powerful, our Deshang sect also dares to twist its whiskers. Well said, Shixiang Huidong. This is the real man of our Deshang sect. How dare you? Do you think this is an ordinary thing? Do you think this is like eating and drinking? This is related to the safety and survival of our Japanese cultivation world. Now that the whereabouts of the mystical silver fox are unknown, she may come back at any time and take revenge on our Japanese cultivation world. How can you still be in the mood to argue about these issues here? Similar quarrels could be heard everywhere in the lecture hall. More than 300 sects, more than 1,000 people were quarreling. Some banged on the table, some banged on the floor. It was really like a pot of boiling water, everywhere was tumbling. Imagawa Kagumo, the leader of the Tiantai sect, looked at the chaotic scene in front of him and couldn't help but sigh. He stood up, put his palms together and said the name of Buddha, Amitabha. Everyone calm down. Imagawa Kagumo's prestige was extremely high. Although his voice wasn't loud, everyone could hear him clearly. The huge lecture hall instantly quietened down. The Japanese cultivators who were sitting cross-legged on the floor all looked at him in unison. When Imagawa Kagumo saw that the crowd had finally quieted down, he said in a deep voice, "Everyone, what we are going to discuss now is who can lead our Japanese cultivation world to carry out this righteous crusade. But don't forget, every minute we argue here, the mystical silver fox will become stronger. As for Li Jiandong, he will not wait for us quietly. The way of cultivation is like sailing against the current. If you don't move forward, you will fall back. While we are arguing here, maybe he is making rapid progress and making great progress." Imagawa Kagumo's words made everyone nod involuntarily. The middle-aged man of Ise Shinto, Ise Xinguang, said loudly, "Master Imagawa, we all understand what you said, but do you have any good suggestions? If not, with all due respect, I'm afraid that your words are reasonable but of no use." Imagawa Kagumo looked around at the cultivation sects and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, I have a suggestion. What do you think?" The various sects were a little tired of arguing, and none of them were convinced by each other. At this time, seeing that Imagawa Kagumo was willing to stand up for them, they pretended to be generous and said, "Master Imagawa, go ahead. We are listening." Imagawa Kagumo nodded to the monks who were in charge of guarding outside the door. The monks immediately ran outside. Not long after, a burly man walked in. Imagawa Kagumo pointed at the man and said, "I suggest that he lead us to Hua to fight against Li Jiandong." Everyone's eyes immediately turned to look at the man. When they saw him, everyone was shocked. They exclaimed in unison, "How could it be him?" Chapter 663. Everyone saw that the man standing in front of them was none other than Saionji Tsunekatsu, who had been beaten to his knees by Li Yundong. Seeing that Saionji Tsunekatsu was acting as usual, as if he had never been injured, they were secretly surprised and couldn't suppress their anger. They roared, "Tsunekatsu, you useless fool, how dare you stand in this place? Tsunekatsu, you have lost all the face of our Japanese cultivation world. If I were you, I would have killed myself long ago. How dare you appear here and say that you will lead us to Hua?" Saionji Tsunekatsu's face was as dark as water. Without saying a word, he sat down cross-legged in front of the crowd, put his palms together and recited Buddhist scriptures in a low voice. Imagawa Kagumo said loudly, "Everyone, please listen to me." Only then did the noisy and abusive crowd stop talking and look at Imagawa Kagumo. Imagawa Kagumo pointed at Saionjitsu Nakatsu with his palm and said, "Everyone, you must be wondering why I chose Saionjitsu Nakatsu as the leader, right?" The crowd suddenly became noisy again. "That's right, Saionjitsu Nakatsu, this waste has lost all our face. He should die. Instead of standing in this place. I can crush Saionjitsu Nakatsu with one finger. Why should he lead me?" Imagawa Kagumo raised his hand and motioned for everyone to be silent. After the voices around him were a little quieter, he said, "Everyone, there is a saying in the 69th chapter of the Spring and Autumn Annals. There is no disaster greater than underestimating the enemy. If you underestimate the enemy, you will lose your treasures. Because of underestimating the enemy, Tsunekatsu Jun has caused the terrible consequence of losing his treasures. But everyone, in all fairness, do any of you have the confidence to defeat a strong man who has defeated Masako Tachibana?" Everyone was suddenly shocked. Although they were very dissatisfied with Masako Tachibana's tyrannical style in the past 10 years, her almost abnormal and invincible strength made them feel a lingering fear. But such a strong person was defeated by Li Jiandong. Although Li Yundong had finally turned Masako Tachibana's power into his own to defeat her, after he returned to Hua, he would definitely not be able to use the power of Mount Koya again, but who knew if this guy had any backup? For a time, everyone whispered to each other and the voices of debate became much softer. Imagawa Kagumo said, "Everyone, when resistance is added together, the mourners will win. This is the principle of an army with grief winning. Who among you has really fought with Li Yundong? Who among you has the experience of going to the cultivation world of China and fighting with many cultivators?" Everyone immediately looked at each other. Although the Japanese cultivation world was separated by a strip of water, they were of the same origin and had always minded their own business. Moreover, there had been no war between the two countries in the past few decades. The cultivation world had also entered a period of peace. From time to time, many Japanese cultivators would go on a pilgrimage to the major cultivation sects in China to find their own cultivation sections. However, in such a peaceful environment, there were no fights between Japanese cultivators and Chinese cultivators. Everyone was speechless and did not know how to refute Imagawa Kagumo's words. Ise Xingguang of Ise Shinto whispered to Goddess Chuyun, "The Tiantai sect and the Shingen sect have formed an alliance." Chuyun's expression was indifferent, and her pair of extremely beautiful eyes were fixed on Imagawa Kagumo. The corners of her mouth were almost imperceptibly raised, revealing a trace of sarcasm. The Shingen sect suffered heavy losses in the last battle, and their status has plummeted. Many protectors of the Tiantai sect have been seriously injured in the Demon Sealing War. If the two don't join forces, they will definitely be squeezed to the bottom in this reshuffle of the cultivation world. Mount Koya and Mount Hai are the two sacred mountains of Japan. If the two join forces, their momentum will be extraordinary. I'm afraid that the power of the Pure Land sect will be ranked behind them. Ise Xingguang sighed and said, "Yes, but I don't know who initiated this matter. Is it Imagawa Kagumo? Or Kaisai Hikariyoshi?" The two of them whispered to each other for a while, then they heard Imagawa Kagumo say, "Everyone, I know what you are not convinced about, but Chongqing has been personally presided over by the great Mandala 5 tribes of the Vajra realm. It can be said that he has been reborn. Moreover, there is really no one who knows the situation of the Chinese cultivation world better than Chongqing." Before Imagawa Kagumo could finish his words, the surrounding Japanese people became excited and said angrily, "No matter how powerful he is, so what? Isn't he still humiliated and defeated? Even if he knows the situation of the Chinese cultivation world, so what? It's not like none of us have been there." While everyone was cursing, Saionjitsu Nakatsu, who had been silent all this time, suddenly put his hands on his knees and shouted angrily, "Everyone, please listen to me." Saionjitsu Nakatsu's roar shook the temple bell on High Mountain, and everyone's voices were suddenly suppressed by him. They all looked at Saionjitsu Nakatsu strangely, as if they couldn't understand how such a humiliated guy could still speak so confidently. The lecture hall was silent for a moment. Saionjitsu Nakatsu looked determined and said loudly in a sonorous voice, "Everyone. Yes, I, Saionjitsu Nakatsu, am a sinner, a cultivator who suffers from shame and torture, but I swear to avenge these disgraces. Only by defeating my previous calamity and defeating the devil who once defeated me can I advance bravely on the road of cultivation in the future. I know that although I have stood up again, I still need to face Li Jiandong and have a fair and square battle if I want to really stand up in spirit. I know that almost everyone here is stronger than me, but it is because of this that I stand up. The reason why I stand up is not because I desire the position of commander, but because I can't wait to wash away my shame. In my opinion, this is not the position of a commander, but the position of a vanguard official. I am asking you to let me be the vanguard official with the determination to die, to explore the road ahead for you. After that, Sanjit Tsunekatsu kowtowed heavily toward the field, and his forehead hit the floor with a dull sound. Please. Sanjit Tsunekatsu's words made everyone speechless for a while. They looked at each other one by one. Many people understood that Sanjit Tsunekatsu had replaced the position of commander with the vanguard official by stealing the concept. Although the name was different, the actual meaning was still very similar. Moreover, the other party was playing the emotional card. It was Yi Yuyu's turn. There was a long silence on the field. Se Xingguang suddenly asked, Tsunekatsu, do you have any plans to be the vanguard official? Sanjit Tsunekatsu straightened up and turned around in a kneeling position. He said loudly, of course. Se Xingguang said, tell me? Sanjit Tsunekatsu said, please forgive me for being presumptuous. If you don't agree with me being the vanguard official, I can't say it. Everyone was furious. Just as they were about to scold him, they heard Se Xingguang laugh and say, when will we go out? Can you always say it? Sanjit Tsunekatsu hesitated for a moment, then said decisively, 15 days later. Everyone was shocked and angry. They couldn't help but curse, bastard. 15 days? I don't know how strong the mystical silver fox will be in 15 days. Idiot, in 15 days, the soul of the mystical silver fox has already been collected by her. Se Xingguang narrowed his eyes slightly and asked, Tsunekatsu, can you tell us why you chose 15 days later? Sanjit Tsunekatsu couldn't help but look at Kaisai Hikaryuni, the great monk of Xinyan Tantrism, who was not far away. Kaisai Hikaryuni lowered his eyes and nodded slightly. Sanjit Tsunekatsu said, there are 4 reasons. First, in 15 days, it will be the inauguration ceremony of the head of the Linggong sect, the branch of the Taoist school, which is the most powerful Taoist force in the Chinese cultivation world. On this day, the cultivators of the Chinese cultivation world will gather together. As far as I know, there will be a conflict between the Jingyi school and Li Yundong, and we can take advantage of it. When the crowd heard this, there was a commotion. Bastard, do we need to take advantage of this in the Japanese cultivation world? Sanjit Tsunekatsu did not show weakness and said loudly, a lion needs to use all its strength to fight a rabbit. What's more, no matter how strong our Japanese cultivation world is, we are still going to China to fight. Without a plan, how can we guarantee a stable victory? This is a battle that we absolutely can't afford to lose. Everyone was suddenly speechless. Some of the people who opposed snorted angrily and stopped talking. With a smile on his face, Se Xingguang nodded to him and said, Tsunekatsu, go on? Sanjit Tsunekatsu added, second, if we choose to go to the Chinese cultivation world on this day, we must choose the strongest and most elite cultivators of each sect. And each sect must be carefully selected and repeatedly considered. I think this will also take a lot of time. Se Xingguang nodded and said, go on? Sanjit Tsunekatsu added, third, since our Japanese cultivation world is going to move out collectively, it will inevitably attract the attention of the Chinese government. Therefore, we might as well go to China in the name of a friendly visit. In this way, we can not only deceive people, but also make it impossible for the Chinese cultivation world to avoid the war under the eyes of the world. When everyone heard this, they whispered to each other for a while. Many people began to be moved by the reason given by Sanjit Tsunekatsu and nodded in agreement. Sanjit Tsunekatsu's heart shook when he saw this, and then he became more and more excited and said, fourth, our trip is not only to defeat Li Yundong, but also to deter the Chinese cultivation world and let them be used by us to encircle the mystical silver fox. However, there are many factions in the Chinese cultivation world, and their roots and leaves are dense. If we visit them one by one, I believe it will take more time. Today, the Chinese cultivation world is gathered together, and it is the best time for us to fight them all. As soon as he finished speaking, there was a sudden uproar. Some cultivators said angrily in unison, the mystical silver fox is in front of us. How dare you easily provoke a war with the Chinese cultivation world? Sanjit Tsunekatsu seemed to have expected that someone would ask such a question. He said confidently in a loud voice, the Chinese cultivators returned from the important place of our Japanese cultivation world with a great victory, and took advantage of this opportunity to release the mystical silver fox. This kind of behavior can be regarded as the beginning of the war. However, our Japanese cultivation world went to China with a peaceful and friendly heart to discuss with them the great plan of encircling and suppressing the mystical silver fox. If they don't agree, we will take advantage of the situation to defeat them, and then force them to work for us. Even if there are some who refuse to accept it, we can kill them and turn their powerful magical weapons into our own, so that when we face the mystical silver fox in the future, we will have a better chance of winning. Japan was located in a remote area with narrow land and few resources, so the national character had a strong sense of crisis and aggression. When Sayonji Tsunekatsu said this, no one felt that there was something wrong. Instead, everyone nodded slightly in agreement. At this moment, many cultivators from cultivation sects said loudly, "Well, Changxingjun, what you said makes sense. We agree with you as the vanguard." If there was a beginning, there would naturally be a response. The True Word sect and the Tiantai sect were originally two extremely powerful forces in the Japanese cultivation world, and there were many small factions attached to them under their wings. Therefore, as soon as they responded, it seemed that there was a general trend in the field. At this time, the Kumo family of the Inyang sect also stood up and echoed, "I agree." This time, it was as if a domino had been pushed down and more sects responded. Se Xingguang and Chuyun looked at each other and shook their heads secretly. Se Xingguang put his hands in his sleeves and said to Sayonji Tsunekatsu with a faint smile, "Changxingjun, I also agree. However, you must remember that you are just a vanguard." Sayonji Tsunekatsu was expressionless. He bowed heavily to Se Xingguang and said, "Changxing will remember it." Se Xingguang did not comment and nodded to Chuyun. "Let's go." After the two of them walked slowly out of the lecture hall, a voice came from behind them. "Xingguang-jun, please wait." Se Xingguang and Chuyun both stopped and looked back. They saw two men wearing black tall hats and yin-yang robes standing behind them. They were Abe Yuri and the young patriarch of the Abe family. Se Xingguang bowed respectfully to Abe Yuri and said, "Lord Abe, what's the matter?" Abe Yuri walked over to Se Xingguang with a sullen face. He first politely saluted Chuyun, and then asked in a deep voice, "Xingguang-jun, how can you agree with such a ridiculous thing?" Se Xingguang asked, "What's so ridiculous about it?" Abe Yuri said, "The Chinese cultivation world has a tradition and history of 5,000 years. Although it has declined in modern times, a centipede is still alive, and a thin camel is still bigger than a horse. In this battle, whoever dares to say that they will win is a madman. They're all crazy. Is it possible that a wise person like you, Xingguang-jun, will also be crazy with them?" Se Xingguang sighed softly, pointed to the clouds in the sky and said, "Lord Abe, look at the clouds in the sky. The reason why they are colorful and enviable is not because they are powerful, but because they know how to measure the situation according to the time. Wherever the wind blows, that's where they will float." This is the valuable experience that history has taught us for thousands of years. The Tiantai sect was powerful for a time, and there were thousands of martial monks under it. However, because they were too arrogant, they fought against Oda Nobunaga and finally suffered a disaster. As he spoke, he recited in a melodious voice, "Misfortune is a blessing in disguise and a blessing in disguise. If we lose this battle, it may not be a blessing. If we win this battle, it may not be a curse." Abe Yuri said anxiously, "But it is precisely because of this that we have to stop this stupid behavior." Se Xingguang sighed and said, "If the general trend shows that the world is crazy, then what we can do is not to stop this madness, but to dance with the madman. Otherwise, we will be abandoned to the corner of history, silent and then disappear. On this point, your Abe family should have a better understanding than us." Abe Yuri let out a long sigh and said helplessly, "Is there no other way?" Se Xingguang shook his head and said, "The general trend. There is no other way. Lord Abe, prepare for war. Since you have chosen to fight, try your best to win." Abe Yuri looked gloomy, sighed heavily and stopped talking. Se Shenko looked at the white clouds and the blue sky leisurely, his eyes lost in thought. After a long time he suddenly smiled and said, "Lord Abe, what do you think? Li Yundong, who has been thrown into the teeth of the storm, is doing now?" Abe Yuri's face was sullen and he didn't speak. However, his son, who was not afraid of the tiger, said, "He must be hiding in fear." Se Xingguang laughed out loud. A man who dares to go to a one-on-one swordsman meeting would not do such a thing. As he said that, he turned his face and looked at Chuyun with a smile. "What do you think?" A slight smile appeared on the corner of Chuyun's mouth, and he said lightly, "I'm looking forward to fighting with him." Chapter 664. Just as the Japanese cultivation world was rubbing their hands and eyeing them covetously, AYZ. Soon of course it was only a vacation for Li Yundong. Poor Chris had been betrayed by Li Yundong without saying a word, so she had no choice but to agree to try shooting a TV series. Although Chris had never learned acting, she had acted in musical and dance dramas at school and had some stage experience. Moreover, Westerners were far more open than Easterners. With the help of other actors, Chris quickly got into the state of acting. But for Chris, filming a TV series was a very difficult thing, especially when the situation in front of her was not what she had expected. She had come here to learn cultivation, so why did she step into the film industry in such a muddle-headed manner? Chris, who was filming, forgot her situation for a moment and couldn't help looking at Li Yundong, who was lying on his back on the beach and sunbathing. Her eyes were full of sadness and indignation. This bastard, he's free and easy, but I'm here suffering like this. Chris was so angry that her teeth itched. Cut. Director Song roared and looked at Chris with an even more resentful gaze. Miss Chris, where are you looking at? Only then did Chris wake up and smile apologetically at the director. Sorry, I was distracted. Director Song shook his head helplessly. Forget it, you've done a good job. I think we should stop here for today. Everyone take a break. The staff and actors of the film crew all cheered. Lou Fair said to Chris with a smile, What were you thinking about just now? You forgot your lines. Chris glanced at Li Yundong and said, I'm not thinking about anything. Lou Fair glanced at Li Yundong and said with a smile, Are you thinking about your dream lover? Chris quickly shook her head and said, No. He's just mine. Lou Fair quickly opened her eyes wide and asked, He's your what? Chris hesitated for a moment and said, He's my registered master. Lou Fair was surprised. Registered master? What did you learn from him? Chris thought for a moment and shook her head. You go ask him. It's not convenient for me to say. Lou Fair pouted. You're still so mysterious. If you don't want to tell me, then forget it. I'll ask him myself. After that, she trotted all the way toward Li Yundong. But when she was still 5 meters away from him, she slowed down. She rolled her eyes, quietly grabbed a handful of sand on the ground, and then quietly walked toward Li Yundong with evil intentions. Almost there, but as soon as she came behind Li Yundong and was about to throw the sand at him, she heard Li Yundong say faintly without looking back, Miss Lou Fair, you're not young anymore. You shouldn't play such a prank, right? Lou Fair angrily threw away the sand in her hand and asked in confusion, How did you know I was behind you? Li Yundong didn't open his eyes. He smiled and said, Because your shadow is covering the sun above my head, I can feel it. Lou Fair suddenly understood. Oh, so that's how it is. I thought you had the ability to predict the future. Boring. Li Yundong smiled and didn't say anything, as if he didn't want to talk about this kind of topic with a little girl like her. But even though he didn't want to say it, Lou Fair was very enthusiastic. Like a curious baby, she kept asking Li Yundong, Hey, how did you do it last time? With a gentle push, you broke a hole in the wall of the hotel? Hey, are you even human? By the way, how did you do it last time when you were absorbing water in Disanxian? I've been wondering. Can you explain it to me? Hey, Chris said that you are her nominal master. What did you teach her? Is it kung fu? What kind of kung fu is it? Can you teach me too? Hey, you wouldn't rather teach a foreigner than me, would you? Hey, say something. You took her as your disciple because she was beautiful, didn't you? Hey, I'm not ugly either. Take me as your disciple too. Hey, I'm talking to you. Why are you ignoring me? Lou Fair asked like a barrage of 100,000 whys, but Li Yundong remained indifferent. He didn't even look at her and didn't say a word. Lou Fair stamped her feet angrily and said, You're so annoying. Why are you pretending to be cool? She heard footsteps behind her. She turned her head and saw Chow Kefi looking at them curiously. She smiled and said, What are you talking about? Lou Fair suddenly acted as if she had seen a savior. She grabbed Chow Kefi's arm and said, President Chow, look. This guy is so annoying. He only knows how to act cool and ignore me. He doesn't even answer me when I talk to him. Chow Kefi couldn't help laughing. She sat down next to Li Yundong, patted him on the arm and said, Hey, it's not polite of you. It's not like you. Li Yundong opened his eyes helplessly and sighed. President Chow, can't you see that I'm practicing? Practicing? Chow Kefi and Lou Fair exclaimed in unison. Lou Fair giggled. Are you practicing the sunbathing magic kung fu? Which level have you reached? Do you want me to teach you another kind of sunbathing kung fu? Chow Kefi knew that Li Yundong was not an ordinary person. She asked curiously, You're lying here and basking in the sun. Soon Li Yundong smiled slightly. Then what do you think cultivation should be like? Lu Feier rushed to say, just like in the movies, you should at least sit cross-legged, right? If lying lazily and basking in the sun like you is called cultivation, then this kung fu is too easy to practice. Li Yundong chuckled and said, the way of cultivation starts with sitting and pole standing, which is what you call sitting cross-legged. But not all cultivation requires sitting cross-legged. Just like me now, you think I'm basking in the sun, but in fact... Li Yundong blinked at Lu Feier and Chao Kefi and said with a sly look in his eyes, in fact, I'm absorbing the essence of the sun and the moon. Humph. Lu Feier immediately snorted. Do you think you're the old demon of Black Mountain? Chao Kefi also chuckled, but after laughing for a while, her heart suddenly moved. For some reason, a question popped up in her mind. She asked, have you cultivated to the level where you can absorb the essence of the sun and the moon at any time? When Li Yundong heard this, he was stunned. He suddenly sat up straight, turned his head and looked at Chao Kefi with bright eyes. How do you know? Lu Feier interrupted, come on, you just said that you are absorbing the essence of the sun and the moon. Who doesn't know? I'm not deaf. Li Yundong shook his head, still staring at Chao Kefi, and said, I mean, how do you know this is a kind of realm? President Chao, what kind of realm do you think it is? Chao Kefi looked at Li Yundong blankly and shook her head. How would I know? I just repeated what you said casually. Li Yundong stared at Chao Kefi for a long time. Seeing that she didn't seem to be lying, he stopped asking and continued to lie down. Lu Feier looked at him strangely and said, you're really strange. You're so surprised when you talk. While she was talking, Chris also came over and looked at Li Yundong with a resentful expression. Lu Feier rolled her eyes and said with a smile, hey Chris, beg your master and ask him to accept me as a disciple. Chris looked at Lu Feier with even more resentment. He still refuses to accept me as a formal disciple. Lu Feier was stunned for a moment. She patted Li Yundong on the shoulder and said, hey Li Yundong, there should be a limit to your arrogance, right? What on earth does Chris want to learn from you? Li Yundong didn't even turn his head. Ask her yourself. Chris saw Lu Feier looking at her curiously. She sighed softly and said, I want to learn cultivation from my master. Lu Feier's eyes suddenly lit up. Cultivation? It seems very mysterious and exciting. She poked Li Yundong's arm with her finger and said, hey, can you also teach me cultivation? Li Yundong said leisurely, then answer me first. What is cultivation? Why do you want to cultivate? Lu Feier said without hesitation, of course, it's to cultivate like monks and Taoists. Cultivating all kinds of magic. Is this cultivation? Isn't that right? Li Yundong shook his head. You have a narrow view of cultivation. He turned his head and looked at Chris. Chris, what do you think cultivation is? Chris bit her lip as if she was weighing her words. She hesitated for a long time before saying, I think cultivation is the process of a person slowly becoming a person from an ordinary person through special training. Li Yundong laughed and said, it's still an explanation with strong Western characteristics. Lu Feier said unconvinced, then what do you think cultivation is? Li Yundong smiled, pointed at himself, pointed at Lu Feier, and then pointed at the staff who were busy in the studio not far away and said, we are all cultivating. Lu Feier said with an unconvinced expression, humph. Playing tricks. It's boring. If I were also cultivating, why didn't I see any special abilities? Li Yundong smiled and said, you're very good at acting. Isn't that a special ability? Lu Feier smiled brightly and accepted all of Li Yundong's praise. Thank you very much, but you're quibbling. It doesn't count. Li Yundong smiled and said, no, I'm not quibbling. As he said this, Li Yundong pointed to the boundless blue sea and then to the vast sky, saying, the world is so big and each of us is so small. In the face of the power of heaven and earth, how can we become strong with such weak power? Lu Feier, you also have your own strong points, especially in your professional field. You are much stronger than me. This is your way of cultivation. The art of cultivation isn't about cultivating some powerful power or special magic. Instead, it's about understanding the world around you and the people in the universe. Li Yundong said with a smile, Lu Feier, you understand the knowledge of the film and television world. This is actually a part of the people in the universe, so I said that you are also a cultivator. Lu Feier blinked her eyes as if she understood and said, what about you? Which part do you understand? Li Yundong chuckled and put his hands on his arms. He closed his eyes and said to Chris, Chris, do you understand what I just said? Go back and think about it. What kind of cultivation do you want to understand? Ask me when you've figured it out. Chris's eyes trembled slightly and she looked a little confused. However, Chow Kefi, who was beside her, had a serious expression on her face, as if she had understood something. Lu Fair was about to speak, but she suddenly saw that the people on the beach had begun to run to the shore. She looked at the beach curiously and was shocked. Oh, the tide is rising? What a big wave. Let's go, let's go. The wave is coming. Chow Kefi and Chris looked at each other and quickly got up to run to the shore. After Lu Fair ran 10 meters away, she looked back and saw that Li Yundong was still lying lazily on the beach. She couldn't help shouting, "Hey, the wave is coming. Do you want to be swept away?" However, Li Yundong didn't seem to hear her and remained motionless. Lu Fair still wanted to shout, but she saw the wave rushing over in the blink of an eye and swallowing Li Yundong's figure in an instant. When the wave receded, he had already disappeared. Lu Fair was shocked. Oh no, he was swept away by the wave. Does he know how to swim? Hey, is anyone going to save him? She was about to turn her head and call for help when she suddenly saw Li Yundong standing beside her and looking at her with a smile. Lu Fair was shocked and said with her mouth agape, "Why are you here? Weren't you swept away by the wave?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "The universe of heaven and earth is a small universe of the human body. All the 5 elements in the world are for me to use. How could I be swept away by the wave?" After that he turned around and left. Only Lu Fair, who was stunned, and Chris and Chow Kefi, who had already gotten used to it, were left behind. After the group returned to the hotel, Lu Fair tossed and turned in bed at night, thinking about what she had seen during the day. For a while she couldn't sleep. She tossed and turned for a while, and her heart couldn't help but feel very upset. She quietly got up, quietly opened Chow Kefi's room and took a look inside. She saw that Chow Kefi was looking at the bright full moon outside the French window with bright eyes, muttering something in a low voice. Although her voice was soft, Lu Fair still heard her clearly. Chow Kefi was talking about nothing else but what Li Yundong had said during the day: the universe of heaven and earth is a small universe of the human body. All the 5 elements in the world are for me to use. As soon as Chow Kefi finished chanting, a ball of flame suddenly jumped out of her hand. Then she muttered an incantation, and the flame in her hand quickly turned into a surging water ball. Then it turned into a rock, a piece of wood, and a metal weapon that kept changing shape. Chow Kefi didn't seem to notice the existence of Lu Fair. She seemed to be immersed in her own world. She whispered to herself and laughed, "So that's how it is, that's how it is." Lu Fair, who was at the door, was stunned. For a moment, she looked at Chow Kefi in front of her as if she were looking at a stranger. This beautiful businesswoman was skillfully playing with the 5 elements in her hand. There was a strange smile on her face, which looked particularly evil under the cold moonlight. Chapter 665. Lu Fair stared blankly at the scene in front of her and didn't move for a long time. It was as if she couldn't believe her eyes. Her whole body seemed to be immobilized. Her eyes widened and she thought to herself, when did Sister Chow become an immortal? How could she know magic? Just as she was puzzled, she suddenly saw Chow Kefi looking at her. The sharpness of her eyes was like a sharp sword, cutting into Lu Fair's heart. She trembled all over and subconsciously wanted to turn around and run away. But as soon as she turned around, she heard Chow Kefi shouting behind her, "Hey Fair, what are you doing?" Lu Fair heard Chow Kefi's gentle voice and doubtful tone. She turned her face and looked at her in surprise, only to see that Chow Kefi was looking at her strangely, as if she didn't understand why she ran away as soon as she saw her. Lu Fair pointed at Chow Kefi and said, "Sister Chow, you looked so scary just now." Chow Kefi asked curiously, "What did I look like just now?" Lu Fair looked scared. "When you were playing magic just now, your smile was so scary." Chow Kefi was at a loss. "Was I playing magic just now?" "No. I was thinking about something else just now." Lu Fair's eyes widened. "I saw it with my own eyes. You can set fire to your hands and then turn them into water and earth." Chow Kefi couldn't help laughing. "You little girl, you didn't sleep well last night. Are your eyes dazzled?" Lu Fair said loudly, "Impossible, I saw it clearly just now." Chow Kefi laughed, walked up to Lu Fair, and waved her hands in front of her. "Don't be silly. If my hands can set fire, won't I become a monster? You must have been dazzled just now. You've been thinking too much about ghosts and gods recently, haven't you?" Lu Fair saw that Chow Kefi was speaking with certainty, and it didn't seem like she was lying. Moreover, she really didn't believe that Chow Kefi could suddenly use magic overnight. Lu Fair thought for a moment with a suspicious look on her face and said, "Maybe? Am I really dazzled?" Chow Kefi took Lu Fair's hand with a smile and said, Have you been so tired recently that your eyes are dazzled? How could you see such a thing? Come, sleep with me. Lu Fei'er was pulled to the spacious bed by Chow Kefi, and then she turned over and lay down. But after she lay down she couldn't fall asleep. The image of Chow Kefi playing with the spell kept flashing in front of her eyes, but when she looked at Chow Kefi suspiciously, she saw that Chow Kefi had already fallen asleep. Her face was calm, and there was a slight smile on her lips, which was completely different from what she had seen before. Lu Fei'er was surprised for a moment and thought to herself, did I really see it wrong? Forget it, don't think about it anymore, sleep. But how could Lu Fei'er fall asleep? She kept thinking about this problem all night. She couldn't figure it out no matter how hard she thought about it. She stayed up until the early morning before she slowly fell asleep. At dawn the next day Chow Kefi slapped her butt, and Lu Fei'er woke up in a daze. Chow Kefi smiled and said, lazy girl, the sun is shining on your butt. It's time to get up. Although Lu Fei'er had a childish personality and the temper of a spoiled young lady, she was very dedicated to her work. Although she was extremely sleepy, she still got up with sleepy eyes and staggered to the bathroom to wash up. After that, she simply tied up her hair, combed it into a fresh ponytail, and then followed Chow Kefi out of the door. After leaving the hotel, she saw that almost all the people of the film crew were at the entrance of the hotel. There was a large bus parked at the door, and the staff and actors of the film crew were also wearing very casual clothes as if they were going out to play, not to shoot at all. Lu Fei'er couldn't help but ask curiously, you're not shooting today? A staff member of the crew shrugged his shoulders and said, Director Song has something to do at home, so he won't be shooting for the next 3 days. We're going to a nearby scenic spot to play. Lu Fei'er immediately cried out bitterly, Why didn't you say so earlier? Why didn't you tell me earlier? If I had known, I wouldn't have gotten up. I'm so sleepy. As she said this, she turned to Chow Kefi and smiled bitterly. Sister Chow, can I not go? I'm so sleepy. I didn't sleep well last night and my eye bags are about to come out. Chow Kefi laughed and scolded, How old are you? You already have eye bags? No, you have to go. The place we're going to today is also our next shooting location. Lu Fei'er's face was very long. Just as she was about to act shamelessly, she saw Li Yundong standing not far away. Her heart's dream moved, and the sleepiness from before suddenly disappeared. She instantly jumped in front of Li Yundong, looked at him with a face full of hope and asked, Hey, Immortal Li, can you teach me magic? Li Yundong looked at her strangely. Big star, big beauty, why are you suddenly asking me this? Lu Fei'er had been a little familiar with Li Yundong these days. She casually grabbed Li Yundong's sleeve and said, Hey, just tell me if you can do it or not. Li Yundong pointed to Chris, who was staring at him from afar, and said with a smile, I haven't even taught her. How can I teach you? Lu Fei'er glanced at Chris and secretly stuck out her tongue. She smiled and said, Then can I ask you a few questions? Li Yundong smiled and was about to speak when he heard the bus honking. A staff member shouted, Hey, we're leaving. Everyone get ready to get on the bus. Chow Kefi waved at Lu Fei'er not far away. Hey Fei'er, are you coming? Lu Fei'er quickly pulled Li Yundong's arm and said, If he goes, I'll go. If he doesn't go, I won't go either. Chow Kefi quickly walked up to her and glared at her. Are you crazy? Are you trying to create a scandal? Look around. Someone is looking at you. Only then did Lu Fei'er come to her senses. She made a face at Chow Kefi and quickly let go of her hand. She took out a pair of big sunglasses from her pocket and put them on. Then she looked at Li Yundong and said, Hey, hurry up and say something. Li Yundong asked Chow Kefi, Where are you going? Chow Kefi said with a smile, We're going to Beifing in the nearby Anding County to pay our respects. Since we're in Haikou, we can't miss the nearby tourist attractions. Besides, we're going to shoot there in a few days, so we're going to do some scouting in advance. Li Yundong was stunned. Beifing? Is it the Beifing where Yuchan Palace, the ancestral court of Yuchan, one of the 5 ancestors of Jindan sect, is located? Chow Kefi and Lu Fei'er were both stunned. They looked at each other and Chow Kefi said with a smile, I don't know what Jindan sect or the 5 ancestors of Nanzong you're talking about. I only know that it's one of the famous tourist attractions in Hainan. Lu Fei'er said to Li Yundong excitedly, Hey, you said you're not a god. Hey, what's Jindan sect and the 5 ancestors of Nanzong? Li Yundong didn't answer her question. He just nodded to Chow Kefi with a smile and said, Okay, I'll go and have a look. After that he followed the crowd into the car. Lu Fei'er was a little unhappy when she saw that Li Yundong was ignoring her. She stomped her feet angrily, but soon she grabbed Chris and asked, "Hey Chris, tell me honestly, is your master a god or not?" Chris didn't dare to talk too much. She quickly waved her hand and began to play Tai Chi. "You can ask him." "Don't ask me. I can't answer you." After that she quickly got into the car. Lu Fei's face was long and she got into the car angrily. After she got in the car she saw that no one dared to sit next to Li Yundong. She was suddenly happy. She quickly ran to Li Yundong's side, sat down angrily and said with a smile, "I'm here again." Li Yundong didn't know whether to laugh or cry. "Hey, if your fans see you like this they'll kill me," Lu Fei said with a smile, "then answer me." Li Yundong was a little helpless because of her pestering, so he could only say, Okay, what do you want to know?" Lu Fei was overjoyed and quickly asked, "Are there gods in this world?" Li Yundong said without hesitation, "Yes." Lu Fei asked curiously, "Really? But why haven't we seen them before?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Which modern people believe in gods? Since no one believes in them, why would they show up?" Lu Fei asked in confusion, "But so many people believe in Christianity, but no one has seen Christ Jesus appear." Li Yundong said with a smile, "How do you know? Besides, the beliefs of each sect are different. The belief of Buddhism is to be free and go to paradise. The belief of Christianity is to atone for sins and go to heaven. The belief of Taoism is to live forever and go to the 9 heavens immortal world. But no sect's doctrine is to cultivate in order to see the gods. So many people in the world want to see the gods and they will see them one by one." Lu Fei said angrily, "You're quibbling. No, show me some magic or I won't believe you." Li Yundong smiled and said, "If you don't believe me then don't believe me. This kind of thing has always existed if you believe it, and it doesn't exist if you don't believe it." Lu Fei saw that her provocation didn't work, so she rolled her eyes and said, "Then tell me, can magic be mastered in a day?" Li Yundong laughed, pointed to himself and said, "Then if I say that I can become a movie king in one day, do you believe me?" Lu Fei said angrily, "Don't make trouble. I'm serious." Li Yundong also said seriously, "I'm also serious." Lu Fei asked tentatively, "So you mean no?" Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. "If you don't accumulate steps, you can't reach 1,000 miles. If you don't accumulate small streams, you can't form a river or a sea. Can Rome be built in one day?" Lu Fei tilted her head and thought for a moment. She couldn't help glancing at Chow Kefi. She bit her lip gently and asked the question that had been bothering her the most. She asked, "Hey, can you explain what magic is?" Li Yundong looked at her strangely. "Why do you want to know this?" Lu Fei said, "Oh, I'm just curious. I always feel that there are some things that can't be explained. I can't figure them out no matter how hard I try. It feels strange and uncomfortable. I can't even sleep well." Li Yundong smiled. He didn't want to talk to her about these things, but he suddenly saw from the corner of his eye that Chris, who was sitting on the other side, was looking at him seriously and eagerly. Her eyes were full of a strong desire for knowledge. Her expression and gaze instantly made Li Yundong's heart skip a beat. He thought to himself, "I pulled this girl out of school, asked her to star in a TV show without her consent, and then ignored her. That doesn't seem to be very good, does it?" Thinking of this, Li Yundong smiled and didn't answer Lu Fei's question. Instead, he said to Chris with a smile, "Chris, do you know why the skin of Western women is generally thicker than that of Eastern women?" This question made Chris a little hesitant. She looked at Lu Fei's snow-white and delicate skin, and a look of envy flashed across her eyes. She shook her head and said, "I don't know." Lu Fei tugged at Li Yundong's arm unwillingly. "Hey, I asked you a question. Why did you change the subject?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "I didn't change the subject. I was just answering your question." Lu Fei said unhappily, "Do you think I'm a fool? What does it have to do with magic cultivation whether the pores of Western women or Eastern women are thicker or thinner?" Li Yundong laughed and said, "Of course it has a lot to do with it." Li Yundong's words not only made Chris and Lu Fei widen their eyes, but also the other people in the car looked at Li Yundong. They thought to themselves, the size of a person's pores has anything to do with magic cultivation? Isn't this person too good at talking nonsense? Some male actors who couldn't stand Li Yundong's good luck with women looked at Li Yundong with a faint smile and thought to themselves, "Bluff, let's see how you bluff." Chapter 666. Li Yunyang saw that everyone was looking at him with different eyes. Some were curious, some were surprised, some were doubtful, and some were disdainful. He chuckled and said, "You don't believe me? Well, let me ask you, Chris, what do you think you Westerners have been eating since ancient times?" Chris answered without hesitation, "Bread and meat." Li Yundong nodded and said, yes, most of the places where Westerners lived a long time ago were cold and bitter. They needed to eat food with strong fire properties to resist the cold. Westerners, on the other hand, had a nomadic culture and a maritime culture, so their main food was bread and meat. Bread was baked in the fireplace, so it was naturally fiery and belonged to the category of hot food. Meat was also a warm and spicy food. Eating too much of it would cause one to get inflamed. However, if a person eats too much food with a strong fire attribute, they will often suffer from excessive internal heat, and slowly their body's constitution will change. Li Yundong rolled up his sleeves and showed his arm to Chris and Lu Feier. He said with a smile, the universe of heaven and earth is a small universe of the human body. All living things in the world had a strong ability to recover and balance themselves. Humans were the spirits of all living things, so they also had the same ability as the universe. Wherever we feel uncomfortable, our bodies will slowly adjust to it. Therefore, Westerners have been eating food with high fire properties all year round, so their bodies are slowly forced to change. And this changes, the pores will expand, the hair will grow longer and thicker, and it will be easier to dissipate heat. Lu Feier, Chris, and the others saw that although Li Yundong was a man, his skin was as delicate as porcelain, and it was difficult to see his hair with the naked eye. Lu Feier deliberately exclaimed, "Oh my God, do you still shave your hair? Are you a man?" Li Yundong couldn't help laughing. With a little chi, the hair on his arms suddenly stood up. This time, everyone could clearly see every open pore and erect hair on his arms. Chris's eyes widened as she whispered, How did he do this?" The people in the car were also curious. Some men also rolled up their sleeves, trying to control the opening and closing of their pores. But no matter how hard they tried, they could only make the muscles on their arms move a little. They couldn't do it as freely as Li Yundong did. Lu Feier was curious and quickly asked, "What's the matter with you? Why are your hairs standing on end at will?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Didn't you just ask me? What is the relationship between the thickness of a person's pores and the cultivation of magic? This is what I want to say. There is a lot at stake here." Then he turned to Chris and said, "Chris, do you know why Western women mature and age quickly?" Chris thought for a moment and asked tentatively, "Does it have anything to do with the size of the pores?" Li Yundong chuckled. "That's right. Westerners had been eating a lot of hot food for thousands of years, so their physique had changed greatly. Almost every Westerner was born with a strong fire nature. As for those with an exuberant fire nature, they would develop faster and mature faster. However, because of their strong fire nature, Western women had larger pores, so the vitality in their body would leak out from their pores. The larger the pores, the faster the vitality would leak out. This was why some people with especially thin pores looked much younger than ordinary people. It was because the yuan qi in their bodies did not leak out easily. Another example, why do you sometimes feel dizzy after taking a hot bath for a long time? The reason is very simple. Because the pores are open, the qi in the body runs a little too much, so people will feel dizzy. Chris's eyes lit up and she pointed at Li Yundong's arm. "Your arm looked like it had no pores at all just now. Was it to store the yuan qi?" she asked. Li Yundong looked at Chris with admiration and said, "Yes, as I said just now, the human body is a small universe that can store and produce essence, qi, and blood. And this essence, qi, and blood will be constantly consumed by our daily activities, so our traditional Chinese medicine advocates people to cultivate their character." What is cultivation? To repair the body's flaws and store one's own qi. To cultivate one's character is to cultivate one's own temperament and not cause one's 5 internal organs to be out of balance because of unnecessary and excited emotions, thus causing harm and burden to the body. Chris seemed to understand something and was silent for a moment. Chow Kefi, who was sitting behind Li Yundong, was listening attentively with sparkling eyes. Lu Feier didn't seem to understand. She dragged out her words and said, "Oh, I see. But you still haven't explained the relationship between the size of the pores and magic cultivation." Li Yundong said with a smile, "You still don't understand? Come on, give me your hand." As he said this, Li Yundong motioned for Lu Feier to reach out to his palm. Lu Feier stretched out her snow-white hand in confusion and put it in Li Yundong's palm. Li Yundong smiled and raised her hand a little. "You don't have to stick to me. You can hang in the air." Then he secretly mobilized his invisible and traceless true essence into his palm, and knocked on Lu Feier's palm from the bottom up. Lu Feier suddenly retracted her hand with a scream and widened her eyes. She pinched her palm with the other hand and said in surprise, "Why did you hit me? Hey, that's not right. I was clearly some distance away from you. How did you hit me?" Li Yundong laughed and said with a smile, "Do you want to try again?" Lu Feier was surprised and curious. She quickly reached out to the top of Li Yundong's palm again. This time she was hanging 10 centimeters in the air. She said, "I've put it down. Why don't you try again?" "I don't believe." Before she could finish her words, Li Yundong's palm suddenly spewed out an invisible and traceless jinqi like a fountain, shaking Lu Feier's arm. Lu Feier covered her palm with a cry and said with a sad face, "It hurts." Everyone in the car was suddenly surprised. Some people asked curiously, "It's amazing. What's going on? Is it Qigong? Come on, it's magic, right?" For a moment, everyone in the car was talking and speculating. Even the driver was so curious that he scratched his ears and cheeks and kept looking into the rearview mirror. Li Yundong said to Chris with a smile, "Chris, do you want to give it a try?" Chris was overjoyed and quickly reached out her hand. But soon she rolled her eyes and quickly retracted her hand. She took out a hardcover book from her bag and put it under Li Yundong's palm. Li Yundong glanced at it and saw 4 golden words printed on the cover of the book: Inner Canon of the Yellow Emperor. Li Yundong looked at Chris in surprise and thought to himself, "Does this girl really carry it around with her? Can she understand it?" Li Yundong smiled and exerted force in his palm again. 2 fists away, he shook the inner cannon of the Yellow Emperor and sent it flying. At this time, everyone suddenly exclaimed. Even the person who said it was magic was tongue-tied. For a moment he couldn't explain what he had seen in front of him. Lu Feier picked up the inner cannon of the Yellow Emperor in surprise. She weighed it in her hand and found that the book, which was 2 fingers thick, was heavy, but Li Yundong was able to easily shake it away. Lu Feier looked at Li Yundong as if she were looking at a visitor from outer space. She grabbed Li Yundong's arm tightly and said, "Hurry up and explain, or I'll haunt you to death even if I become a ghost." Li Yundong laughed and said, "The reason is very simple." He opened the inner cannon of the Yellow Emperor, picked up one of the pages and said with a smile, "Blow on it hard." Lu Feier was stunned. After taking a deep breath, she puffed up her cheeks and blew on the page. The beauty's breath was fragrant and musky. Although it was not very strong, it made the page rustle for a while. Li Yundong smiled and said, "Not bad. Look, you can also make the page flutter. Why can't you understand that I just sent the book flying with qi?" Lu Feier asked curiously, "How is that the same?" "I'm blowing air." "How are you blowing air?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "It's the same. When a living person is beheaded, if he has made strenuous movements, the blood that spurts out of his neck can spray up to a height of several meters. Do you know why? It's very simple. Because the qi and blood in the body were flowing violently at that time, when the head was suddenly cut off, the surging qi and blood instantly sprayed a few meters away from the narrow blood vessels. This is caused by the strong air pressure and blood pressure. Just now, when you blew the qi stored in your lungs out of your narrow mouth, the power generated can blow these pages. It's the same reason. Li Yundong spread out his palm and said, "When the human body's qi and blood circulates, it can produce a powerful force. This force generally only exists in the meridians and blood vessels. But if people go through special training, they can mobilize this running qi and spray it out of their skin pores. You ordinary people can't control the opening and closing of your pores, so you can't feel the leakage of this qi, let alone use this qi to do something. But once you can easily control the opening and closing of your pores, you can mobilize the qi of your whole body to leak out through one of your pores. In this way you can produce extremely strong air pressure and power." Lu Feier suddenly understood. "I see." But she quickly frowned and said, "But what does this qi have to do with magic cultivation? What does it have to do with big pores?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "The bigger the pores, the harder it is to control their opening and closing. And the smaller the pores, the stronger the jinqi that the human body can release. The stronger this qi is, the more things you can do and the more powerful you will be." Lu Feier blinked her eyes and said, "Then what does it have to do with magic?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Of course it has something to do with magic. Everything in the world is nothing more than the 5 elements, and the 5 internal organs of the human body correspond to the 5 elements. Whichever element you want to control, you can choose which qi to release in your body. This is all the 5 elements of heaven and earth for my use." As he said this, Li Yundong turned his finger, and a ball of flame quickly jumped on his fingertip. But this flame disappeared in a flash in everyone's eyes. When they wanted to take a closer look, they saw that there was only a cloud of smoke left on Li Yundong's fingertip, leaving only a trace of memory, which kept replaying in their minds in amazement. Lu Feier looked at Li Yundong with her mouth open and tongue-tied. She stammered, You are really a god." Li Yundong chuckled, but his eyes were fixed on Chris. He knew that no one else in the car could understand the true meaning of his words. He had said them only for Chris. As the saying goes, the great way is easy to find, but the true way is hard to hear. If someone listened to his words, they would immediately be able to achieve the great way and achieve success in cultivation. But if someone listened to it, it would just be a fleeting cloud and they would forget it in a blink of an eye. Li Yundong saw that Chris's eyes were flickering and she was deep in thought. He thought to himself, Chris, you came to China with sincerity to learn cultivation. It's not that I don't know your sincerity, but I can't accept disciples casually. Whether you are this material or not, whether you are qualified to step into this threshold depends on how much you can understand. But what Li Yundong didn't notice was that at this time, Chao Kefi, who was sitting behind him, also had a strange light in her eyes. She seemed to be so excited that she couldn't control herself. Her body was trembling slightly, and she grabbed the armrest tightly with both hands. Her fingers exerted force and scratched 5 fingerprints on the hard iron armrest. After Li Yundong explained the principles of cultivation magic, he didn't speak again. No matter how Lu Feier asked him, he closed his eyes and didn't say a word. After about an hour's drive, the group finally arrived at the foot of Wenbi Peak in Anding County, Hainan. Everyone got out of the car and saw a green mountain rising from the ground. The mountain was beautiful, and the mountain was mainly composed of basalt and schist from the mountainside to the top. Although it was late winter, the vegetation on the mountain was lush, and the top of the mountain was surrounded by clouds and mist. After Chao Kefi got out of the car, she returned to normal. After taking a look at the mountain, she said curiously, "It doesn't look particularly special. The mountain doesn't seem to be high." Lu Feier followed Li Yundong and got out of the car. At this time she had completely worshipped Li Yundong. As soon as she heard this, she immediately patted Li Yundong on the shoulder and said with a smile, "As the saying goes, the mountain is not high. If there is an immortal, it will be famous. With the powerful immortal Li here, it's hard for this place not to be famous." Lu Feier's words were unintentional, but 2 young men in Taoist robes passed by. When the 2 men heard this, they immediately became suspicious. They frowned, turned their heads and shouted angrily, "Who are you? How dare you call yourself an immortal here?" Chapter 667. Their voices were not loud, but they were clearly heard by Li Yundong, Lu Feier and the others. They were almost there. Lu Feier turned her head to take a look. She saw that although the 2 men were wearing navy blue Taoist robes that were a little gray and had black crowns on their heads, they looked a little out of place. However, the 2 of them had big eyes and thick eyebrows. Their gazes were so sharp that they seemed solid. Lu Feier stuck out her tongue, made a face at them and said, "What are you doing?" "I was just saying it casually. Why are you so overbearing? Besides, I didn't claim to be an immortal." The 2 Taoist priests glanced at Lu Feier with unkind eyes and soon looked at Li Yundong. When they saw Li Yundong, they couldn't help but be stunned and looked at him suspiciously. The 2 Taoist priests only felt that Li Yundong was standing in the same place. At first glance, he seemed to be no different from the tourists around him. But after looking at him a few more times, they found that this extremely young boy seemed to be integrated with the surrounding environment. It was as if he was there, and the small universe of his body and the big universe of heaven and earth were one, inseparable from each other. But this feeling only lasted for a moment. When the 2 Taoist priests were shocked and took a closer look, they suddenly found that Li Yundong looked like an ordinary person. The feeling of being one with heaven and man just now had disappeared. This kind of strange feeling surprised the 2 Taoist priests. While they were surprised and puzzled, they suddenly heard an enchanting and moving voice coming from the side. "Feier, stop talking. Let's hurry up the mountain." The 2 Taoist priests turned their heads and saw an extremely beautiful woman talking to Lu Feier with a smile. The 2 Taoist priests were shocked at the same time. They looked at each other, their eyes full of shock. For a moment, they stared at Chao Kefi blankly and couldn't move for a long time. Seeing that the 2 of them were looking at Chao Kefi in a daze, Lu Feier said loudly, "Hey, haven't you seen a beauty before? Are you stupid? Are you guys monks or not? You might as well renounce asceticism." Only then did the 2 Taoist priests come back to their senses. As if they had just woken up from a dream, they hastily bowed to Lu Feier and the others with flustered expressions, then quickly ran up the mountain. Lu Feier looked at the backs of the 2 of them, curled her lips and sneered, "They are Taoist priests, but they can't walk when they see a beauty." Chao Kefi pretended to be angry and glared at her. "Don't talk nonsense. Be careful of your words. Do you think no one will recognize you if you wear sunglasses?" Lu Feier giggled. "Don't be afraid. With immortal Li here, everything will be fine." Li Yundong smiled non-committally and said, "Let's go up the mountain." "I'll be there soon." After that, they slowly climbed up the mountain. On the other hand, the two Taoist priests who had left earlier dashed all the way to the top of the mountain. The two of them ran all the way from the foot of the mountain to the top, passing through the Luck Hall, the Jade Toad Pavilion, the Yuanshan Hall, and other places. Finally, they arrived at the Tianshu Pavilion of the Seven Stars Pavilion. Finally, they found an old man in a white robe, a small black hat, and a white beard. The old man was standing on a rock and slowly waving his sword. Judging from his posture and movements, it was a move of the Taiji sword. When the two Taoist priests saw the old man, they hurriedly shouted, "Master, Master." The old man didn't look back and continued waving his sword slowly. His movements were heavy and slow, as if he was not holding a sword, but a huge rock that weighed thousands of pounds. The old man said in a long voice, "What's the matter? Look at how anxious you are. What did I teach you?" The two Taoist priests looked at each other and said in unison, "A monster has come down the mountain." The old man slowed down and looked at them with a faint smile. "Have you watched too much Journey to the West? In such a peaceful world, how could there be a monster? Besides, even if you've watched too much Journey to the West, I'm not Tang Seng." A slightly taller Taoist priest stamped his feet and said, "Oh master, don't joke around. I'm not lying to you. Go and have a look. I've never seen a woman with such a strong demonic appearance." "A woman?" The old man laughed and said, "You must have seen a woman who is too beautiful, so you think she's a monster, right? Hey, let me tell you, if you don't have any evil thoughts in your heart, even if a real monster stands in front of you, it can't be considered a monster. If there are evil thoughts in your heart, any woman you see is a monster." The two Taoist priests were so angry that they couldn't speak for a moment. After looking at each other, they rushed to the rock together and grabbed the old man's arms. Lian Xing said, "Master, other people can't see it, but us two brothers have opened the heaven's eye. How could we not see it? You'll know when you come with us." "Yes, master, go and have a look." The old man's hands were grabbed. He glared at them and shouted, "What are you doing? Let go of me. Do you still know how to respect your master? What a scandal. I'm not going." Without saying a word, the two Taoist priests bent down and grabbed one leg each, lifting the old man up as if he was carrying a wooden pole. The two Taoist priests looked at each other. Almost there, and the old Taoist was so angry that he blew his beard and glared. He kept hitting the two Taoist priests' heads with his hands. "Hey, put me down. You guys are getting bolder and bolder." The two Taoist priests grimaced as they were beaten by the old Taoist. They tilted their heads and smiled, saying, "Master, bear with it. You'll know when you see it." The old Taoist said angrily, "Then put me down. I have my own legs. Don't I know how to walk?" The taller Taoist smiled apologetically, "Master, don't give me that. You said the same thing the last time, but when we put you down you turned and ran. We won't fall for it this time." The shorter Taoist priest said seriously, "Master, this is not us brothers fooling around. Just now, when we went down the mountain, we heard someone bragging about being an immortal in front of our Jade Toad Palace on Pen Peak. Then we saw a woman with a strong demonic appearance hanging out with this person. In addition," the taller Taoist priest continued, "in addition, we also saw a very strange person. He looked a little like a fellow Taoist but also a little different." The old Taoist struggled for a while but could not get down. He could only be carried by the two of them like they were carrying a Buddha statue, causing many tourists to look at him curiously. The old Taoist looked resentful, as if he did not believe the two of them. He snorted and said, "Humph, you two country bumpkins who have never seen the world. Last time, when you saw the Nikon logo, you said it was a Nike. When you saw the Cherry QQ, you said it was a luxury sports car. I've lost all my face because of you. Let's see how you will be embarrassed this time. By the way, what did you mean by fellow Taoists? What do you mean by a little different? Hey, although you two have never seen the world, your cultivation is not bad. You can't tell if a person is a cultivator or not, can you?" The taller Taoist priest smiled awkwardly when he was scolded by his master, but he quickly said seriously, "Master, I also think it's very strange. When I first saw him, I felt that he was no different from an ordinary person in the secular world. But after looking at him a few more times, I felt that he was a cultivator with a very high cultivation. It was as if he had become one with heaven and man, and he had become one with heaven and earth. But after I looked at him a few more times, this feeling quickly disappeared. It's very strange." The shorter Taoist priest quickly nodded. Yes, I feel the same way." The old Taoist priest was stunned. He stroked his white beard that hung down to his chest and asked curiously, Becoming one with heaven and man? How old does this person look? The taller Taoist priest said, he seems to be in his early 20s. The shorter Taoist priest also said, about the same. He looks a little younger, but he has a very mature temperament. The old Taoist priest was surprised. Huh. He looks so young, but he has such cultivation? That's impossible, right? The taller Taoist priest said, that's right. That's why we find it strange. Master, think about it. The moment we came down the mountain, we heard someone spouting nonsense as if he was trying to provoke us. Following that, we saw such an unfathomable fellow. That's not all. When we turned around, we saw a seductive woman. How could we not be nervous? How could we not think too much? If a few fellows come and our Jade Toad Palace defeats them, we'll lose a lot of face. The old Taoist priest scoffed. What a joke. Our Jade Toad Palace has always stood aloof from worldly affairs. Who would have nothing better to do than to find trouble with us? The shorter Taoist priest said, I am master, that's not how you put it. A man has no intention of hurting a tiger, but a tiger will eat a man's heart. Master, it's important to be wary of others. That's what you taught us. The taller Taoist priest hurriedly said, yes, yes. Master, don't be stubborn. Follow us and you will know. Helpless, the old Taoist priest could only say, all right, I'll follow you. If not, go back and copy the Vajra longevity technique 100 times. The taller Taoist priest shuddered in fear. 100 times. Master, we will die. The shorter Taoist priest said, Master, we are definitely right. Don't worry. The group quickly descended the mountain. When they walked all the way to the Jade Toad Pavilion, they saw a group of people walking slowly towards them. This group of people were mostly young men and women. Most of the men were handsome, and most of the women were wearing sunglasses and dressed fashionably. The taller Taoist priest who was carrying the old Taoist priest hurriedly pointed at a young man who was walking and talking. He said, Hey master, that's him. The old Taoist priest patted his head and shouted in a low voice, Put me down. The two Taoist priests seemed to wake up from a dream and quickly put the old Taoist priest down. As soon as the old Taoist priest's feet landed on the ground, he looked at the young man. Indeed, as his two disciples had said, the man's temperament was extraordinary. After carefully looking at him for a while, he slowly stroked his beard and said, Well, this must be a cultivator. If I'm not wrong, he has now entered the realm of heaven and man oneness. Heaven and man oneness. This is the realm of immortal golden body. Amazing, such an achievement at such a young age, it's really amazing. In modern times, the only cultivator I've heard of who has cultivated to such a realm at such a young age is Wang Yuanshan. I wonder which sect this young man belongs to and which master's disciple. The two disciples of the old Taoist priest looked at each other and said in surprise, Immortal golden body? No way. How old is he? They naturally knew that there were 3 levels of the golden body realm, namely the primary level of the immortal golden body, the middle level of the immortal golden body, and the top level of the immortal golden body. Using the majestic Jinshin Jinshi to protect the body, invulnerable to swords and spears and impervious to water and fire, it was called immortal. Using heaven and man oneness, one could mobilize the 5 elements of the world at will, and be one with heaven and earth, it was called immortal. Reaching the peak, one could challenge the might of heaven and thunder, and the body of the yang spirit could shine as brightly as the sun and the moon, and live as long as heaven and earth, it was called immortal. The old Taoist priest glanced at his two disciples and said with a smile, Now you know that there is always someone better, don't you? The two Taoist priests snorted, looked at Li Yundong with dissatisfaction and muttered in a low voice, What's the big deal? We are all Jinshin. Who is afraid of who? The old Taoist priest rolled his eyes. He stroked his beard and said thoughtfully, He has reached such a realm at such a young age. Where did such a powerful young man appear in our cultivation world recently? The old Taoist priest's face changed. He took out a mobile phone from his pocket and quickly sent a text message. After a while his mobile phone rang. It was a MMS. The old Taoist priest opened the MMS, looked up at Li Yundong and suddenly said, So it's him. No wonder, no wonder. His two disciples leaned over to take a look, only to see that the MMS was from Du Fei of the Chuanjin Dragon sect, and there was a photo of Li Yundong on the MMS. The two Taoist priests looked at each other and asked, Master, who is this? The old Taoist priest laughed and said, I said that you have never seen the world, but you still don't admit it. This is Super Li. He's the most famous young man in our cultivation world right now. The tall Taoist priest looked at Li Yundong unconvinced and said, Super Li? How arrogant. I want to see how invincible he is. Chapter 668. When the old Taoist heard his disciple's words, he immediately glared at him and shouted, "What do you want? What did I teach you? Did you learn some skills just to use them to fight with others?" The tall Taoist priest shrunk his head after being reprimanded by the Taoist priest. "You almost there?" The short Taoist priest thought for a moment, patted his head and said in surprise, "Oh, I remember now. Isn't Super Li the leader of the Fox Zen school? He was the leader of a group of demons. No wonder the woman beside him is so bewitching." The old Taoist snorted twice, put the phone back into his pocket and said, "It's good that you know. Don't be so surprised in the future. The monsters are controlled by an organization, and they haven't done anything evil. Why are you so excited? Let's go. Mind your own business." The tall Taoist grabbed the old Taoist's arm and said, "No, master, look at that monster. Where have you seen such a monster?" The old Taoist impatiently followed his gaze and was stunned. He gasped and unconsciously tugged at his beard. He widened his eyes and said, "What a strong seductive aura. This is simply unheard of and unseen." The person he was looking at was Chow Kefi. Her eyebrows were like an ink painting, and her lips were like vermilion. She was like a calamity who had walked out of a painting. Her every move revealed a strange seductive charm. Wherever this extremely beautiful woman went, she would attract attention. Women who saw her would be extremely jealous, and men who saw her almost couldn't walk. The old Taoist clicked his tongue in wonder and said, "Strange, strange." It had such a heavy demonic appearance, yet there was not the slightest bit of demonic aura. How strange. I've lived for 99 years, and this is the first time I've seen such a physiognomy. The tall Taoist quickly said, "Master, I told you it was a monster. Hurry up and give it a try. Let's see where this monster came from." The old Taoist glared at him. "Nonsense. She didn't provoke you. Why did you provoke her?" After saying that, he turned around and was about to leave. The short Taoist priest hurriedly advised, "Master, they don't come with good intentions. You can't let down your guard. Even if you don't provoke her, you can at least test her from afar, right? Let's find out their origins first. If they really have evil intentions, we can at least be prepared." When the old Taoist heard this, his body immediately stopped. He turned around, thought for a moment and stretched out his hand. "Give me my sword." The tall Taoist priest quickly handed him the steel sword he had taken from the old Taoist priest. However, the old Taoist priest threw it aside without even looking at it. He glared at him and said, "Bastard, give me another one." The short Taoist priest hastily took out a 2-feet-long peachwood sword from his Taoist robe and respectfully handed it over. The old Taoist took the peachwood sword, took out a talisman from his sleeve, and put it on the peachwood sword. He gently blew on the peachwood sword, and then pointed at Chow Kefi from dozens of meters away. The two Taoist priests immediately widened their eyes and stared at the talisman nervously. They knew that it was a demon-revealing talisman. Whichever monster their master pointed at with the peachwood sword, the figure of that monster would appear on the talisman after a while. However, they had never expected that the peachwood sword would tremble violently as the old Taoist pointed at it, as if it didn't dare to face the target it was pointing at. The old Taoist frowned, and the jinqi in his body surged. He pointed at the demon-revealing talisman on the tip of the sword and shouted in a low voice. All the jinqi in his body surged into the tip of the sword. However, as soon as his jinqi surged over, he suddenly saw the demon-revealing talisman break into pieces in an instant, and then the peachwood sword actually burned by itself with a hiss. At this moment, the 3 Taoist priests were instantly dumbstruck. What kind of monster was this? It was so powerful that even the demon-revealing talisman didn't work. Even the peachwood sword, which was dozens of meters away, was forced to spontaneously burn. The old Taoist priest stared blankly at the burning peachwood sword in his hand, and his eyes flashed with horror. "Oh my God, what kind of monster is this? It's so powerful." The tall Taoist priest and the short Taoist priest were dumbfounded. They knew that this peachwood sword was a Taoist magic treasure with spiritual nature. Although it was not very powerful, it was still a spiritual item. If it hadn't encountered a terrifying monster just now, it would definitely not have been like this. The tall Taoist priest stared blankly for a moment before his eyes suddenly flashed with killing intent. He gritted his teeth and immediately took out a copper bell from his bosom. He fiercely stared at Chow Kefi and raised his foot to rush toward her. Just as he moved, he was stopped by his master. The old Taoist priest glared at him and shouted, "What are you doing?" The tall Taoist priest gritted his teeth and said, "Subdue the demon." The old Taoist priest laughed angrily. You? What kind of demon did you subdue and what kind of demon did you get rid of? Aren't you afraid of being subdued by others? The tall Taoist priest frowned and said angrily, It's my wish to kill the demon and die for the Tao. The short Taoist priest's blood was also boiling, and his face was determined. Senior brother, I'll go with you. The old Taoist priest shouted angrily in a low voice, Bastard. You two bastards. I worked so hard to bring you out, and I still expect you to inherit my mantle. Are you going to die just like that? Besides, how do you know that the other party must be a demon? If the other party is really a demon, why is there no demonic aura on her? How do you explain this? The tall Taoist priest said anxiously, But master, didn't you see that the demon-revealing talisman and the peachwood sword cracked and burned when they were pointed at the demon? This is not a demon, what is it? How do you explain this? The old Taoist priest's face darkened and he said in a low voice, Even if it's a demon, it's a rare demon for thousands of years. As he said this, he looked at Chow Kefi from afar and said in a deep voice, As far as I can see, this person has no demonic aura at all, but her demonic aura is exposed. Moreover, when the peachwood sword with pure yang power is pointed at her, it can spontaneously burn. This shows that the supreme Yin demon aura in this person's body is incredibly powerful, but there is no leakage of her demon aura. This means that either she has cultivated to the peak state and returned to nature, or her demon aura and spiritual power are hidden deep in her body and her soul consciousness has not been awakened. Otherwise there will be more or less leakage of demon aura. The short Taoist priest said, Master, are we just going to watch here? The old Taoist priest pondered for a while and said, Don't worry. I'll go and meet this Li Yundong. The tall Taoist priest said in surprise, Master, why are you going to find this guy? This guy is in cahoots with the demon and is willing to degenerate himself. Wouldn't it be a disgrace to go to such a person? The old Taoist priest glared at him and said, Is face so important? Besides, I've heard Shiji Du Fei talk about this guy. Du Fei speaks highly of him. He is a gentleman and doesn't seem to be an evil person. The tall Taoist priest snorted bitterly and said, You may know a person's face but not his heart. Who knows? You two wait for me here. Don't move without my orders. The old Taoist priest ignored him, turned around and walked toward Li Yundong after saying these words. The tall Taoist priest snorted and turned his face to one side. The short Taoist priest quickly took a step forward and said with concern, Master, be careful. The old Taoist priest waved his hand and left without looking back. Li Yundong and the others were leisurely watching the surrounding scenery in the jade-toed pavilion of Pen Peak. Along the way, Lu Fei kept pestering him with questions. Every time they passed a scenic spot, Li Yundong would introduce the historical stories of these scenic spots. Coincidentally, if Li Yundong had gone to other scenic spots, he might not have known these historical stories. However, Pen Peak was a famous Taoist mountain. He had read many cultivation books in the spirit space, so he knew these things like the back of his hand. The group of people walked under the octagonal building with flying eaves and arches while listening to Li Yundong speak with fervor and assurance. The jade-toed pavilion you see now is dedicated to a great figure in the history of our Chinese cultivation world. This person is called Bai Yuchan, formerly known as Guchanging. He was one of the 5 ancestors of the South sect of Jindan sect during the Southern Song dynasty. He was also the official founder of the South sect of Jindan sect. And the Jindan sect played an important role in the history of our Chinese Taoism. Lu Fei was curious and couldn't help but ask, Is this Bai Yuchan powerful? Are you more powerful or is he more powerful? Li Yundong laughed involuntarily. Bai Yuchan was a grandmaster who founded the Jindan sect's South sect. Hainan was originally a barren land for Taoism, but he preached the Tao and eventually spread Taoism here. How can I compare to such a grandmaster? Lu Fei rolled her eyes and asked, Then who is in charge here now? Is it also the successor of this Jindan sect? Li Yundong shook his head. I'm not sure about that. Maybe Ziyuan knows more. She might know. Lu Fei was about to speak again, but she saw an old man in a Taoist robe walking over. The old man looked at her with a smile and said, Miss, can you step aside? Lu Fei was a little puzzled, so she stepped aside. The old Taoist walked up to Li Yundong, made a Taoist salute with one hand and said, Jinren Li. Li Yundong saw that although the old Taoist's beard was white, his eyes were bright and his voice was loud. Although he was relatively thin, the muscles that were exposed outside his clothes were strong and hard. What surprised Li Yundong was that the old Taoist in front of him was obviously a cultivator, but he couldn't tell what realm he was at all. Has this old Taoist returned to his original state? Li Yundong guessed in surprise. In his opinion, the old Taoist cultivation was at least at the level of immortal Jinshin. Only those who had reached this level could truly return to their original state, and they might even be masters of thunder retribution. Li Yundong didn't dare to be negligent. He respectfully returned the salute and said with a smile, "I don't dare. I haven't asked your name yet." The old Taoist smiled slightly, pointed to a remote corner not far away and said, "Can I have a word with you?" Li Yundong smiled and said, "Okay." After that he turned around and said to Chris, Lu Feier, Chao Kefi and the others, "Wait for me here. I'll be back later." Seeing Li Yundong leave with the old Taoist, Lu Feier stretched her neck and looked for a while. Suddenly she turned her head and said excitedly to Chao Kefi, "Hey Sister Chao, are there really such cultivation sects? It's so interesting." But as she spoke, she saw that Chao Kefi's expression was a little unnatural. She looked at the old Taoist with a hint of vigilance in her eyes. Lu Feier was stunned. "Sister Chao, what's wrong with you? Do you know this Taoist?" Chao Kefi suddenly came to her senses. She smiled and said, "I don't know him. I'm just a little uncomfortable." Lu Feier didn't doubt her. "Oh," she said, still looking at Li Yundong not far away with interest. After Li Yundong followed the old Taoist to a corner, he saw the old Taoist stop and look at Li Yundong with a smile. He said, "I am the 21st generation successor of the Chuanjin Dragon sect, Zhang Zhishuan, the abbot of the Yuchan Palace. Jinren Li, may you live a long life." Li Yundong immediately laughed. "So it's a senior of the Chuanjin Dragon sect. May I know how to address you in Du Fei?" Zhang Zhishuan smiled slightly. "That's my little Shirji." Li Yundong suddenly understood and saluted. "Sorry for not recognizing you. What can I do for you, senior?" The smile on Zhang Zhishuan's face suddenly disappeared. His face was serious and his words were shocking. He said, "Jinren Li, with all due respect, don't you know that you are in danger and that a catastrophe is imminent?" A few words of nonsense. Some people say, "Why are there so many Jinshin masters? How many of them can pop up everywhere? Come on, it's so fresh. There are tens of millions of believers in Huaxin sect, and there are hundreds of thousands of cultivators who practice hard. Is it difficult to have dozens of Jinshin masters among so many people? Are you kidding me? Besides, some people say that in the later stages of the book, there are more and more Jinshin masters like cabbages. Classmate, when you were poor, did you hang out with those who were as poor as you all day long? When you were rich, did the people around you slowly start to change? Did you become rich and have more friends? When you became a millionaire, did you find that there were so many multimillionaires? When you became a millionaire, did you find that there were so many billionaires? When you reach the level of a billionaire, you will realize that there are actually so many billionaires in this world. This principle is the same as cultivation. The higher your level, the higher the realm and the higher the level of people you meet. Yes, I know that most people can't come into contact with this level, but please, can't you just watch it quietly? Besides, who told you that this sect in Hainan is a small sect? Go Baidu and find out who this old Taoist Zhang Zhishuan is." Chapter 669. When Li Yundong heard Zhang Zhishuan's horrifying words, he was shocked and asked with a serious face, "Senior Zhang, I don't know why you said that." Zhang Zhishuan stared into Li Yundong's eyes and said, "You really didn't notice it at all?" Li Yundong said respectfully, "Senior, please give me some advice." Zhang Zhishuan frowned secretly and said, "Don't you feel anything unusual around you?" "Unusual?" Li Yundong thought for a moment and said, "Senior, please tell me." Zhang Zhishuan had lived for nearly 100 years. Of course, he knew that it was better to be polite to everyone he met. However, for the sake of Du Fei's high evaluation of Li Yundong, he wanted to warn the young man in front of him out of kindness, but he didn't want to force himself to do it. Soon, although Li Yundong was straightforward, he still thought for a moment and said meaningfully, "Jinren Li, it's not easy for you to have such a realm at such a young age. You have to cherish it. I'll give you a word of advice. Please remember it." Li Yundong bowed and said, "Senior, please enlighten me." Zhang Zhishuan said, "Remember, essence nourishes the real root, qi nourishes the spirit, yuanyang does not go to the true, dantian nourishes the treasure of longevity, and 10,000 taels of gold does not belong to others. You must not be greedy for beauty and indulge in it, and in the end, lose your treasure of longevity." Li Yundong's heart skipped a beat and he said, "Isn't this the boxing scripture of Xingyi boxing? Is he referring to the relationship between me and Suchan? Yes, that should be it. Maybe Jinren Du told him." Li Yundong smiled slightly and said, Thank you for your guidance, Jinren Zhang. I'll keep it in mind. Zhang Zhishuan saw that Li Yundong could still accept his words with a smile. He couldn't help but think highly of the young cultivator in front of him. He laughed and said, "Of course, I can see that Jinren Li is still a Yuanyang child, which is rare and commendable. But the way of cultivation is like sailing against the current. If you don't move forward, you will fall back. It's like going into the abyss in the middle of the night. If you're not careful, you will be crushed. Jinren Li, you must remember to grasp your true self. Don't be blinded by the illusions of the world." Li Yundong solemnly bowed and said, "I will remember your teachings." Zhang Zhishuan was about to speak again when he suddenly heard the sound of a man and a woman arguing not far away. The two of them looked in the direction of the sound and saw a man in a suit and leather shoes arguing with a brown blue-eyed foreign woman. When Li Yundong saw them, he was stunned for a moment and thought to himself, "Isn't this Zhao Yuzhen and Justin? What were they doing here?" Li Yunyang saw that Justin was talking to Zhao Yuzhen fiercely. Her expression was full of indignation and resentment, while Zhao Yuzhen was explaining something to Justin with a helpless expression. Neither Li Yunyang nor Zhang Zhishuan were very proficient in bird language, so they didn't understand what they were talking about for a moment. But soon they saw Justin suddenly see Chao Kefi and the others. She immediately rushed to Chao Kefi, pointed at Zhao Yuzhen and said in English, "You can't fire me. I was invited by him." Chao Kefi hadn't expected that they would meet Justin and Zhao Yuzhen here. She was shocked and quickly sneered, "You're wrong. You were invited by us. Of course we can fire you. Besides, it's not us who started the trouble but you, Miss Justin. Forget all of this. It's all over. If you don't believe me, go and ask Zhao Yuzhen. Let's see if he dares to interfere in your business." Justin immediately turned her head to look at Zhao Yuzhen. Zhao Yuzhen didn't expect that he would meet Chao Kefi and the others here when he took Justin out to relax. The most damn thing was that he didn't want to reveal himself in this matter, so he secretly encouraged Justin to make trouble for them. But now, even a fool knew that he was the one who had ordered it. Zhao Yuzhen was so angry that his teeth itched. It was fine when he brought Justin out, but this girl touched his sore spot. She always asked him to stand up for her, but how could he dare to stand up for her? If it was just Chao Kefi, it would be fine. But the problem was that now Li Yunyang was involved. It was too late for him to run away. How could he dare to show up? This damned B***tish, if I had known it would be so difficult, I wouldn't have provoked her. Even I don't dare to provoke someone, but you don't know what's good for you. Zhao Yuzhen cursed in his heart, but in order to pretend to be a big shot in front of a beautiful woman, he had bragged a little too much, so now he couldn't get out of the situation for a while. Zhao Yuzhen saw Justin looking at him. He was about to say something, but from the corner of his eyes, he saw Li Yundong looking at him not far away. Zhao Yuzhen was scared out of his wits. Why does this little bastard always run into me? Wherever I am, he is there. Why is that? But soon Zhao Yuzhen thought of a more serious thing. His mind suddenly went blank. He thought to himself, "Damn it, this little bastard must have found out that I was the one who ordered Justin to go on strike. He won't take revenge on me, will he? If he holds a grudge against me, then he will plot against me a few times in the future. I will be dead for sure." Zhao Yuzhen didn't even look at Justin. He quickly rushed to Li Yundong and said with a pitiful face, "Child Li, don't listen to this bitch's nonsense. She doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. I didn't instigate her. You have to believe me." Li Yundong was not a fool. With just a glance, he understood the cause and effect of the matter. His heart was like a mirror, but he didn't say anything. He just said with a faint smile, "Mr. Zhao, I didn't say anything." "Why are you in such a hurry to explain?" Zhao Yuzhen opened his mouth and immediately realized that he had a guilty conscience. He confessed without being forced to do so. He wanted to jump up and slap himself in the face. Zhao Yuzhen smiled dryly and stammered, "Child Li, you are a magnanimous person. Don't argue with her. I promise I will never appear in front of you again, okay?" Li Yundong saw that Zhao Yogan's words were somewhat incoherent. It was obvious that he was so scared that he was incoherent. At this time, the abbot of the Jade Toad Palace, Jinren Zhang Zhishuan, was in front of him. He didn't want others to say that he was aggressive, so he smiled and said, "Mr. Zhao, I don't understand what you're saying. The world is so big. It's your own business where you want to go. I'll be there soon. However, I want to give you a piece of advice. If you do too much evil, you will bring about your own destruction. You have to accumulate some good karma, Mr. Zhao. Otherwise, you will be in big trouble in the future." Although Zhang Zhishuan didn't know what had happened here, when he saw that Li Yundong had given some of the words he had said to Zhao Yuzhen in front of him, He immediately grinned and thought to himself, "Hey, this boy is a little interesting. He's so young but he talks more like an old man than me." When Zhao Yuzhen heard Li Yundong's words and saw that he actually didn't want to argue with him, he was immediately overjoyed. He hurriedly nodded and bowed, saying, "Yes, yes, child Li is right." Although Justin didn't understand what Zhao Yuzhen and Li Yundong were talking about, she could tell what had happened just by looking at their expressions. She immediately widened her eyes and said to Zhao Yuzhen, "You lied to me. You said that you were the biggest boss in this crew, so I listened to you. Otherwise Zhao Yuzhen didn't know that Li Yundong's English was so bad that he could hardly understand what they were talking about, but because of his guilty conscience, he was so scared that his back broke out in a cold sweat. For a moment, anger rose in his heart, and evil grew in his heart. There was a fierce light in his eyes. He turned around and slapped Justin in the face. He glared at her fiercely and spat out a few murderous words from between his teeth. "Shut up." When Zhao Yuzhen turned his face, it immediately turned into a flattering smile. "Child Li, don't listen to her nonsense. This B*TCH will do anything in order to be promoted." Li Yundong smiled, which looked a little mysterious. He said, "I'm not interested in knowing about you and her." Zhao Yuzhen nodded repeatedly and said with a smile, "Yes, yes, child Li is magnanimous. Naturally he won't argue with us. Let's go, let's go." As he said this, he pulled Justin and shouted angrily in a low voice, "Idiot, come with me." Justin had never suffered like this before. She was stunned for a moment. She was dragged more than 10 meters away by Zhao Yuzhen before she suddenly came to her senses. She screamed and fought with Zhao Yuzhen regardless of the situation. Zhao Yuzhen was furious. He slapped Justin hard in the face and made her tumble. Then he left in a huff. Justin cried on the ground for a while before she slowly got up and left, choking with sobs. Zhao Yuzhen left Justin alone all the way. He measured Li Yundong's gentlemanly heart with his own mean mind. The more he thought about it, the more afraid he became. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that Li Yundong would take revenge on him. He was frightened as if he was running away. He returned to the place where he was staying, picked up his luggage and rushed to the airport to fly back to Shenzhen. Then he took the high-speed train from Shenzhen back to Tianan City. After arriving in Tianan City, Zhao Yuzhen felt that he was very far away from Li Yundong. Only then did he breathe a sigh of relief. After dragging his luggage out of the railway station, he called his sweetheart. He thought in a mess, "Damn it, I didn't eat fish but I got a fishy smell. Li Yundong, this little bastard, is really my nemesis. If he appears anywhere in the future I'll take a detour. By the way, I'll close that tea house when I get back, so as not to cause trouble for me." Zhao Yuzhen was full of thoughts when he suddenly saw a young beggar with a broken arm dragging his body to him and shouting at him, as if he wanted to beg him. Zhao Yuzhen had nowhere to vent his anger, so he didn't have the mood to do a good deed. He kicked him and shouted, "Get out of my way." When the beggar heard his voice, he was stunned for a moment and then he raised his head. When he saw it, his eyes suddenly widened and his face showed ecstasy. He shouted and rushed toward Zhao Yuzhen. One of his broken arms grabbed Zhao Yuzhen's thigh, and the other hand grabbed Zhao Yuzhen's palm. He quickly and quietly stuffed a ball of paper into Zhao Yuzhen's palm. When Zhao Yuzhen saw the beggar rushing over, he was shocked and angry. Just as he was about to scold him, he suddenly saw that the beggar's face had been beaten black and blue, and there were scars everywhere. The broken arm was wrapped with a broken paper bag and it looked like a wooden stake. It was very terrible. But the most frightening thing was that as soon as the young beggar opened his mouth, he revealed a piece of broken tongue. The wounds were all new. When he was excited, blood even came out of his mouth, which made people's hair stand on end at first glance. Zhao Yuzhen was so scared that he had goosebumps all over his body. Just as he was about to drive the beggar away, he saw two middle-aged beggars rushing out of nowhere and dragging the young beggar away. Zhao Yuzhen shivered and watched the young beggar struggle crazily and roar at him. He unconsciously clenched his hand, and only then did he realize that there was a ball of paper in his palm. Zhao Yuzhen opened it and saw a line of crooked words written on it. It was scribbled and distorted, as if it had been written in extreme tension and fear. It read, "I am Xinyu, the son of Shenwan Kai. Whoever saves me will be rewarded handsomely." It would have been better if Zhao Yuzhen hadn't read it. As soon as he saw it, he sneered and thought to himself, "If you are the son of Shenwan Kai, then I am the son of the Jade Emperor. Are you kidding me? How could Shenwansai's son end up like this?" Without saying a word, Zhao Yuzhen rolled the paper into a ball and threw it aside. Chapter 670. Zhao Yuzhen threw the ball of paper aside, which rolled on the ground and fell into the sewer. Xin Yu, who had been dragged away, watched helplessly as the paper he had painstakingly written at the risk of his life was thrown away by Zhao Yuzhen so casually. He didn't know where he got the strength from, but he struggled fiercely and broke free from the hands of the two beggars. Then with a wild roar he pounced on Zhao Yuzhen like a madman. Zhao Yuzhen saw Xin Yu pouncing on him like a wild beast. His face was so horrible and ferocious that it was terrifying. He was so scared that he stood there in a daze and didn't even know how to hide. Xin Yu pounced on him and bit Zhao Yuzhen's neck. Zhao Yuzhen roared. In his anger and pain, a force surged out of his body and pushed Xin Yu away. He saw that Xin Yu's mouth was full of blood, and he couldn't tell whether it was Xin Yu's or his own. In anger, he touched his neck with his hand and suddenly took a deep breath. He said angrily, F***ck, how dare you bite me? Don't run. Hey you. Before Zhao Yuzhen could finish his words, he saw the two beggars rush to Xin Yu like a gust of wind. One hugged his legs and the other hugged his body. They held him skillfully, turned around and ran away. Obviously they had done this kind of thing many times. Zhao Yuzhen was shocked and angry. He covered the burning wound on his neck with his hand and roared, Hey, don't run. You want to run away after biting me? But the two beggars ran very fast. After a few turns in the crowd, they disappeared, leaving only Zhao Yuzhen stamping his feet and cursing. By the time the security guards and patrolmen of the station came over slowly, the two beggars had already disappeared. Zhao Yuzhen roared angrily, What are you waiting for? Hurry up and arrest them. What are you doing? Call the police and arrest them. Can't you see that I've been bitten like this? But the patrolman tried to persuade him, Oh, these beggar gang members are running around everywhere. Where can you catch them? Just admit your bad luck. Zhao Yuzhen was furious and shouted, Bullsh**t. Your director is my best friend. Do you want to quit your job by saying that? The patrolman's face stiffened, and a trace of anger flashed in his eyes. Then, come back with us now and make a statement. Only after we have filed a case can we proceed with the arrest. Zhao Yuzhen said angrily, Bullsh**t. How long can we wait? He has already gone to Mars. He was about to continue cursing when he saw a pointy-faced beauty panting and running towards him. It was his mistress. The pointy-faced beauty ran up to him and looked at the blood on Zhao Yuzhen's neck in horror. She asked in surprise, Mr. Zhao, what's wrong with you? Zhao Yuzhen had no place to vent his anger and he was used to hitting women. Without saying a word, he raised his hand and slapped her. The pointy-faced beauty dodged subconsciously, and Zhao Yuzhen was furious. He raised his hand and was about to hit her again. How dare you dodge? F***ck. Who told you to hide? The patrolman next to him couldn't stand it anymore. He shouted, Hey, don't hit her. Zhao Yuzhen glared at him rudely and said, I just hit her. What do you want? Ask her when did I hit her. The pointy-faced beauty trembled slightly, but she smiled obsequiously and said to the patrolman, No, he didn't hit me. It's okay. Zhao Yuzhen glared at the patrolman and said, Did you hear that? I hit my own woman. It's none of your business. If you have the ability, go and catch those people who committed the crime just now. Why are you so rude to me? The patrolman snorted angrily, turned around and left. He waved to the security guards and other auxiliary policemen next to him and said, Let's go. Don't look at her. There's no need to talk to such people. The group of people turned around and left. As they walked, they sneered disdainfully and said, You are so beautiful, but you have to be the mistress of a rich man. You deserve to be beaten. Hearing this, the pointy-faced beauty's eyes flashed with shame and resentment, but this emotion only lasted for a moment. Soon she smiled again and carefully served Zhao Yuzhen to his car. After getting in the car, the pointy-faced beauty sat in the driver's seat and tentatively said to Zhao Yuzhen, Mr. Zhao, where are we going? Zhao Yuzhen was furious. He slapped her again and said, Nonsense, of course we're going to the hospital. Are you blind? This time, the pointy-faced beauty didn't dare to dodge again. Her face was burning with the slap, and tears immediately welled up in her eyes. But she didn't dare to speak. She quietly wiped away her tears and drove the car to the hospital. Along the way, Zhao Yuzhen pressed the wound on his neck. He shouted in pain, kept cursing the pointy-faced beauty, and kept urging her to drive faster. The pointy-faced beauty smiled and asked carefully, Mr. Zhao, who did this to you? If you catch him, you can't let him go. Zhao Yuzhen snorted angrily and cursed, Damn it, you're just a damn beggar. How dare you say you're. Before he could finish his words, The expression on Xin Yu's face when he had rushed at him flashed across his mind. Zhao Yuzhen was stunned, and a thoughtful look flashed across his eyes. He thought to himself, why did this beggar say that he was Shen Wansai's son instead of anyone else? Why was he so angry and crazy after I threw him the note? Could it be? Zhao Yogan's eyes suddenly widened and his mouth opened wide. He was shocked and said, no way, how could Shen Wansai's son end up like this? This is impossible, isn't it? But the more he thought about it, the more suspicious he felt. He took out his mobile phone and made a phone call, but he couldn't call Shen Wankai directly, so he took a detour and called Xin Yu's former secretary. But after calling, the secretary stammered and said that Xin Yu had already traveled abroad and it would be a long time before he came back. Zhao Yuzhen was stunned. After hanging up the phone, he made a few more calls in a row, but he couldn't find Xin Yu. When he asked, the other party said that they couldn't find Xin Yu's whereabouts. Zhao Yuzhen put down his mobile phone with a thoughtful look on his face, but he couldn't help getting excited in his heart. If this is true, then Shen Wankai will owe me a big favor if I help Mr. Shen find his son. With his support in the future, I don't have to be afraid of Li Jiandong, that little bastard. The more Zhao Yuzhen thought about it, the more excited he became. He slapped his thigh and said loudly to the pointy-faced beauty, hurry up, drive to the Shen family. The pointy-faced beauty was stunned. Mr. Zhao? Go to the Shen family? Which Shen family? Zhao Yuzhen shouted angrily, nonsense, which Shen family is there in Tianan City? Of course it's the Shen family. The pointy-faced beauty asked in confusion, but Mr. Zhao, the wound on your neck. Zhao Yuzhen slapped her again and roared, F***ck, just do what I say. Why are you still asking? Hurry up. He slapped the pointy-faced beauty in the face. The pointy-faced beauty subconsciously shrank her neck and tilted her hand. Immediately, the car rushed into the crosswalk and hit a telephone pole with a bang. Fortunately, no one was hurt. Zhao Yuzhen didn't wear a seatbelt, so his head hit the glass hard. His neck was already bleeding from the bite. With such a hit, the blood vessels in his neck suddenly burst and a lot of blood flowed out. He passed out. The pointy-faced beauty was wearing a seatbelt, so she was fine. However, she was so scared by the scene in front of her that her mind went blank. She knew that Zhao Yuzhen would beat her if he was not careful. Now that she had caused such a big trouble, wouldn't Zhao Yuzhen kill her? The pointy-faced beauty tried to feel Zhao Yogan's breath, but found that he was not breathing at all. This scared her out of her wits. In a panic, she immediately drove away crazily. At this time, she didn't dare to go to the Shen family, nor did she dare to go to the hospital. She drove back to the golden house that Zhao Yuzhen had prepared for her. When she returned to her residence, she parked the car in the garage. She made a phone call while crying. After a while, a round-faced beauty came to her house. It was a sister who had served Zhao Yuzhen with her in the past. She was also his mistress. As soon as the pointy-faced beauty saw her sister, she immediately hugged her and burst into tears. The round-faced beauty quickly comforted her in a low voice. After asking her what had happened, she thought for a while with a frightened look. Then, she gritted her teeth and whispered a few words in the pointy-faced beauty's ear. The pointy-faced beauty was so scared that her face turned pale. It's illegal? The round-faced beauty gritted her teeth and said, no one will find out in a few days. When we sell all the bastards' things, we will run away. They won't be able to find us. The pointy-faced beauty looked at Zhao Yuzhen in panic. But what if he can still be saved? The round-faced beauty gritted her teeth and said, haven't you been beaten by him enough? Do you still want to live like this? The pointy-faced beauty remembered that Zhao Yuzhen had beaten her regardless of the occasion and time. She suddenly became angry and dared to do so. With a ferocious look on her face, she nodded to her sister. After they made up their minds, they stayed up late at night, trembling with fear. Then they drove Zhao Yuzhen out of the city into a remote riverside. They put Zhao Yuzhen in a sack, stuffed a few big and heavy stones into the sack, and tied the sack tightly with a strong rope. The two men laboriously carried the sack to the riverside and threw it hard. With a splash, Zhao Yuzhen, who was in the sack, suddenly woke up as if he knew that he was going to die. He struggled and screamed crazily. But it was too late. As soon as he struggled, his body slowly sank into the water. With his life and Xin Yu's secret, he disappeared from this world forever. The pointy-faced beauty and the round-faced beauty didn't expect that Zhao Yuzhen was still alive. They were scared out of their wits and quickly drove away from the scene. They didn't know how big of a disaster they had caused by sinking their corpses into the sea this time. Just as Zhao Yuzhen was half drowned by his little sweetheart and died with a grievance, An unexpected guest suddenly came to Li Yundong's hotel room. Chapter 671. After saying goodbye to Zhang Zhishuan, Li Yundong returned to the hotel where he was staying. He hung a Do Not Disturb sign on the door of his room early and began to meditate in his room. Soon. But when he opened his eyes, he suddenly found a rather thin figure standing in his room. This person was wearing a white gown and a small black hat. Was Zhang Zhishuan. Li Yundong was shocked. He quickly got up and bowed. "Jinren Zhang, may I ask why you are visiting me so late at night?" Zhang Zhishuan waved his hand with a smile and said, "Jinren Li, you don't have to be so polite. Sit down and talk." Li Yundong laughed and politely pointed to a chair in the room. "Jinren Zhang, please sit down." After Zhang Zhishuan sat down, he took out 8 thread-bound books that were as thick as his pinky finger from his sleeve like a magic trick. He held the 8 books in both hands and said, "Jinren Li, I came here late tonight for nothing else but to exchange pointers with you." Li Yundong was stunned. He took the 8 books and glanced at them. He saw a few big white words written on them. Vajra Longevity Skill. Li Yundong asked curiously, "Jinren Zhang, this is?" Zhang Zhishuan laughed and said, "These are some of my experiences in the past 80 years of cultivation. Please give me more advice, Jinren Li." Li Yundong was surprised and confused. He thought to himself, this Jinren Zhang Zhishuan is really strange. Who would come to someone else's room in the middle of the night to offer a book? Moreover, why did he give it to me instead of others? This should be his 80 years of hard work, right? Why did he give it to a stranger for no reason? Zhang Zhishuan seemed to have guessed what Li Yundong was thinking. He laughed and said, "Jinren Li, you don't have to worry. Listen to me. If you understand, you will know why I came to visit you so abruptly." Li Yundong calmed down and said, "Please enlighten me, Jinren Zhang." Zhang Zhishuan waved his hand and said, "I don't dare to enlighten you. Jinren Li, I was born in 1912. At that time, the revolution of 1911 ended and the Republic of China was established. After that, I experienced the National Protection War, the Law Protection War, the Warlord War, the Kuomintang War, the Anti-Japanese War, and the Liberation War. Until today, it can be said that I have spent half my life in the flames of war. Do you know what I felt the most during the war?" Li Yundong looked at the old Taoist elder in front of him with some respect. He shook his head and said, "I don't know." Zhang Zhishuan sighed and said, "In this era of war, my biggest feeling is that human life is really worthless. At that time, the whole world seemed to have gone crazy. Everyone was killing each other. No one believed in Tao and no one cultivated. All the cultivation sects fell into a terrible disaster. In this calamity, countless cultivation manuals were either lost or burned. The essence of our Taoism has almost been lost. How regrettable. But when the war finally ended, do you know what I lamented the most?" Li Yunyang thought for a moment and said tentatively, "Are you lamenting that although the war is over, the Hua cultivation world has been completely destroyed? No one knows Taoism and no one cultivates Taoism?" Zhang Zhishuan opened his mouth wide and looked at Li Yundong as if he had met a bosom friend. He slapped his thigh and said excitedly, "That's right. I told you that my eyes couldn't have been wrong about Jinren Li, but my 2 disciples didn't believe me." Li Yundong laughed and said, "Jinren Zhang, you flatter me. I'm just a junior in the cultivation world." Zhang Zhishuan smiled and continued, "From the early 1950s to the end of the 1980s, I had been cultivating in seclusion and didn't care about the affairs of the world. But later, the country reformed and opened up, and gradually let go of the control of the cultivation world. I saw that the cultivation world had declined to the extreme, and all kinds of cultivation methods were mixed up, and it was difficult to distinguish the true from the false. Therefore, I came out of seclusion and taught everyone my lifelong experience, the 8-part Vajra skill and the longevity skill. So, Jinren Li, don't think that what you have in your hand is a secret. In fact, this is a Taoist classic that anyone can buy and learn. It's not a great thing, huh?" Li Yundong naturally didn't believe what Zhang Zhishuan had said. This was just something that could be bought everywhere. Zhang Zhishuan was laughing at himself. What kind of decline does the cultivation world have to be for such a Taoist master to say such a thing? Li Yundong said with awe, "Jinren Zhang, to tell you the truth, I used to have similar thoughts as you, but today I know that I'm not alone." Zhang Zhishuan laughed and said, "I might as well tell you the truth. Originally, I just saw that you were able to cultivate the immortal Jinshin at such a young age, and your character is quite good. You also have a sense of propriety. I think that in time, you will definitely be another great master in our cultivation world. But I also saw that you were surrounded by powerful and beautiful monsters. I was afraid that you wouldn't be able to control yourself and make a mistake. At that time, it would not only be your loss, but also the loss of our Taoist cultivation world. That's why I came here so abruptly in the middle of the night. Please don't blame me, Jinren Li. Li Yundong said with a serious face. Jinren Zhang, I'm flattered. Please rest assured that I will definitely help you pass on your cultivation methods and lifelong experience in the future. Zhang Zhishuan nodded with appreciation. He stroked his white beard and said, Since I left the mountain in 1993, I have accepted many disciples regardless of race, religion, faith, gender, and even nationality. But there are only two who can really inherit my mantle. These two guys have spent countless elixirs of mine, and they have endured countless days and nights of my body expansion before they barely reached the Jinshin phase. However, compared with other cultivators, they have cultivated early, so it's inevitable that they will be arrogant. If you meet them in the future, please take care of them. Li Yundong said with a smile, Don't mention it. We should take care of each other and help each other. Zhang Zhishuan pointed at Li Yundong and said with a smile, Young man, you are too steady. You speak like an old man, which doesn't sound like what people of your age should say at all. Forget it, I won't disturb you anymore. I'll go back first. Jinren Li, take care. Li Yundong thought of himself before cultivating and how domineering he had been when he had just started cultivating. He immediately smiled with emotion and said, Jinren Zhang, I won't see you off. Zhang Zhishuan was about to turn around and leave when he suddenly turned back and looked at Li Yundong with a strange expression. He said, Jinren Li, I have something to say. I don't know if I should say it or not. Li Yundong asked curiously, What is it? Zhang Zhishuan said seriously, Jinren Li, don't you know that the female companion beside you is an extremely terrible monster? Li Yundong's heart suddenly trembled and he thought to himself, This Jinren Zhang is really powerful. Could it be that he found the mystical silver fox? No, it should be said that he found Chao Kefi's abnormality? I didn't see any clues. How did he see it? Zhang Zhishuan seemed to know what Li Yundong was thinking. He smiled slightly and said, Jinren Li, don't be surprised. I've learned physiognomy before and opened the third eye. I can tell good from evil at a glance, let alone a monster with such a strong demonic appearance. Only then did Li Yundong understand. He said, Jinren Zhang, don't worry. I know what I'm doing. Zhang Zhishuan didn't want to talk too much at first, but he really appreciated Li Yundong very much. He was afraid that the young man would regret it in the future if he took a wrong step, so he couldn't help but say something. At this time, seeing that Li Yundong had understood, he naturally knew the truth that there was no need to beat the drum. After nodding, he said with a smile, Jinren Li, take care of yourself. I'll go first. After that, his figure flashed and disappeared in an instant. Li Yundong pondered and thought, it seems that the soul of the mystical silver fox has invaded Chao Kefi's body, but why hasn't her soul awakened? Hasn't her consciousness awakened? It seems that Chao Kefi is still dominating her body? What's more, why hasn't she shown any demon chi yet? It's really strange. Li Yundong thought about it for a while but still couldn't figure it out. He couldn't be stupid enough to rush over and ask Chao Kefi himself, so he stopped thinking about it. He opened the Vajra longevity skill and began to read it. It was amazing. Li Yundong suddenly found that the Vajra longevity skill was a treasure for ordinary people to keep in good health and prolong their lives. For a great cultivator like him, it was also a secret skill that would benefit a lot from it. Li Yundong read very fast and had a photographic memory. When dawn broke, he had already finished reading the outer 8 parts of the Vajra cultivation skill and the last volume of the inner 8 parts of the longevity skill. After reading it, he covered the book and thought deeply as if he had understood something. In his opinion, the Vajra longevity technique could be said to be a secret and outstanding technique of his country's Taoism. The 8 parts of the Vajra technique were yang, hardness, exterior, manifestation, separation, fire, qian, body, hotian, and foundation. The longevity technique was yin, softness, interior, concealment, ridge, water, kuan, spirit, xiantian, and superior. If one practiced the Vajra longevity skill at the same time, it would be a combination of the inside and the outside, the combination of hardness and softness, the combination of qian and kuan, the combination of the innate qi and the acquired qi of the 5 grains and water in the internal organs. If one practiced it for a long time, one could reach the realm of oneness of heaven and man and void in action. Li Yundong was also a great master who had read all the Taoist classics. Naturally, he was a person who knew what was good and what was bad. Especially some places that ordinary people seemed to pass by, He chewed them over and over again, stopped to think deeply, and understood something. In particular, Li Yundong had now officially entered the realm of oneness of heaven and man. He had reached the realm of the immortal golden body and was advancing towards the realm of the immortal golden body. And now he was a little sleepy. How could he reach the realm of the immortal golden body? But as soon as he was sleepy, someone immediately sent him a pillow. This was really a pie falling from the sky, a good thing that he didn't even dare to think about. Then Vajra longevity skill that Li Yundong had read before had mentioned that the realm of the immortal golden body corresponded to oneness of heaven and man, and the realm of the immortal golden body corresponded to void in action. In Li Yundong's opinion, what was void in action? It meant that the spirit and body of a cultivator had reached a high degree of unity, and the perfect coordination between the small universe of the human body and the big universe of heaven and earth had been realized. The heaven and earth were the human body, and the human body was the heaven and earth. At this time, the spiritual energy of a cultivator had reached an incredible level. Not only could their minds and divine senses begin to challenge the power of heaven, but they could even travel in the universe. In the process of traveling in the universe and searching for the true self, the state that the cultivator's body felt was void in action. The more Li Yundong thought about it, the more excited he became. He couldn't wait to sit down cross-legged and cultivate immediately to experience the realm of void in action. But he knew that he couldn't meditate at this time, because this kind of void in action meditation could not predict when he would wake up. If there was no protector by his side, the consequences would be unimaginable. Li Yundong thought for a moment, then immediately took out his mobile phone and called Zhou Qin. After briefly explaining his situation, he put down his mobile phone and waited patiently for Zhou Qin's arrival. About an hour later, there was a knock on the door of Li Yundong's room. Li Yundong didn't even raise his head. While looking through the Vajra longevity skill, he said, "Come in, the door is open." As soon as he finished speaking, the door was pushed open, and a delicate body rushed into his arms with a burst of fragrance. A familiar and sweet voice rang in Li Yundong's ear. "Yundong, I missed you so much." Li Yundong was stunned. He took a closer look and saw that the person in his arms was none other than the little girl. He asked in surprise and joy, "Why are you here?" Su Chan raised her head with a smile and pointed behind her. "Sister Ziyuan is here too." Li Yundong looked over and saw Ziyuan's ethereal figure standing at the door with a smile on her face. Zhou Qin was standing next to her, slender and elegant. Li Yundong immediately laughed. "Why are you all here?" Insomnia. I woke up at 4 o'clock. I tossed and turned and couldn't fall asleep, so I had to get up and write. I had a headache, so I went back to sleep. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.